Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun runs north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Go.
So I originally booked a flight with American Airlines, but then they canceled on me like 2 days ago, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, I need to get out here and do this podcast. And
where did you fly from?
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
Wacky, Wisconsin. Yeah.
I'm glad you said Wisconsin, because if you would have just said Milwaukee, I'm not going to lie, I would have struggled to find that on the map. I have terrible knowledge of geography in the U.S. in many places. Milwaukee would have been one of those.
Yeah. I kept on getting like Montana and Minnesota confused when I was looking at the map, and I was
How
like,
dare you?
I was like, I know. I was like, I need to know this. I'm a grown man, but the struggle's real.
How was your travel experience?
Dude, so it's super weird right now. There's nobody in the airports. So,
I just traveled as well, so I was just kind of reconfirming that it was probably the same as mine. I think it might be, if you have a legitimate reason to travel, I think it's the safest time for you possibly to ever travel.
That's exactly what I was thinking as I was walking through the airports. Yeah. Because my brother dropped me off at the airport in Milwaukee. I checked in, went all the way through the airport, went through security, got all the way to my gate, which was all the way at the end. Didn't see a single other passenger. Not one other passenger. There was a few staff, working the airport, but that was it. And then there was like 3 passengers.
We flew out of Chicago O'Hare. I did flew into Chicago, drove to St. Louis or near St. Louis, did a podcast, drove back to Chicago, did a podcast, flew home. And I think I saw more airline employees, gate agents, pilots, and flight attendants than actual passengers. And I've flown through O'Hare before. Let's just be upfront and call it a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And I mean, the airport's
a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. There was nobody in security, as in people waiting to go through security. There was nobody waiting to check in. And I've never seen an airplane that clean. Mm-hmm. People were, I think there was actually 5 people on the aircraft.
Wow.
I got upgraded to first class because I've just flown Delta forever, and I think the next passenger was 30 rows back.
Wow. Yeah.
So I felt great.
It was nice. I was like, okay, like I am social distancing. This is probably the safest place to be while social distancing. And you on this plane.
Yeah, and you could tell that those planes were. I don't know what they're doing in there, if they have like a defogging machine, but they're in there. They're cranking it for sure.
What do you mean cranking what?
They're just cleaning it out.
Oh, right.
In between every single flight, they're not messing around. Mm-hmm. One thing I haven't heard is of airline personnel getting sick. I've heard of one captain, and I think it actually was on American. It was a news article, but I haven't heard a bunch about flight attendants or the stewards or even a lot of airport personnel.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was masked up, so it wasn't.
Were you?
No, no. I was like, no, I can't. I was like, I can't do it. I had one in my pocket just in case somebody yelled at me, or in case I went through security. Someone they're like, well, to get on this flight, you have to cover your mouth. I was like, all right, well, I've got one ready to go, but no, I didn't end up wearing it. But it's like I've been coughing into my elbow since I was 17. Or not touching my face and washing my hands. It's like, what more do you want me to do? And I naturally keep 6 to 25 feet away from other human beings. Like that's just.
So this for you might be the same as it is for me. I've always enjoyed social distancing to a degree. Mm-hmm. I would describe my friend pool. I heard somebody talking about this yesterday, actually. It's deep as opposed to wide. So I have fewer friends, but I feel much more connected to those friends, and that's always just kind of seemed natural to me. Mm-hmm. And it's just fine. I have no problem staying away from everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same way. I think that's like what the definition of like being an introvert is. Like you don't need like all this noise and all these 50,000 people around you at all times. It's like I would much rather have 2 or 3 really good friends than just constantly talk with 50,000 people that I don't really care about, or they don't care about me. Like I know they don't have my back.
I don't have the interest or energy to have that many connections.
I don't either. And it's interesting. I've just now recently been kind of getting into social media as I've been, building up my organization and whatnot. And it's so strange going from, not getting any calls or phone, or calls or texts or, anything like that, except for, a handful of close friends. Yep. And now it's like everybody has access to me. So I've been getting all these DMs, all these emails, and all this stuff.
Be careful.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was like, I turn off the notifications. I'm like, I'll go check it.
Yeah, when you want to.
When I want to check it.
Control the device instead of the device controlling you.
Exactly. Yeah, because it would hit the point of overwhelm at one point, and I was just like, whoa, okay, just turn off all those notifications.
I've actually had a really good experience with social media. I'd say 99% of the interactions I have are positive, and then there's the 1% of the moderately psychotic DM messages.
Yeah.
Because this will explain to you how my depth of knowledge on mostly Instagram is probably what I'm the most active on. I think you have to follow each other for you to be able to go directly into their DMs. Otherwise, it comes as a request.
Right.
So that I follow very few people, not intentionally. I just don't spend that much time on it.
Right.
But I have some interesting, like I said, that 1% message requests. Like, I hope to meet you one day. I'm going to kill you. I'm like, oh,
that's fun.
hello.
I haven't gotten any death threats yet, which I'm really happy about.
I've had like 3.
Really?
Or how you should be ashamed of yourself.
For what?
You're the real cause of destruction in the world. That type of stuff. And I just let it go.
Oh yeah.
I maybe engaged with one of those people one time, and it just didn't go the right way, so I just turned it off.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done, because I want like anything that I do in social media to be positive, because like what I do and what I do with my organization, everything is positive, and so it's interesting. Like I'll be reading the comments, because that's one thing I do. I do intentionally reach out to people who take the time to comment on a post or something, because I want to like have a connection with them, and they took the time out of their day, so I'll take the time out of my day to respond. But you'll occasionally, just get these like off the hand, super negative comments, and it's like I'll just block them. Like, okay, like you're no longer welcome in my little social media space, because it's toxic. One person gets in there, and then another person starts piling on top of it, and the next thing you know, it's spreading like a virus, and you've got this 20 message chain of people just arguing about something, and like, no, this isn't what this is for. The
varsity move, when people get negative, as you go back at them with positivity and you thank them for their negative comments, it will
kill them with kindness.
It twists them off into orbit. They don't know how to deal with it. They're used to the shallower transaction where it's like, fuck you, man. Like, no, fuck you. Like, that's, right. I think what people, I don't know if that's what they want, but it seems like that's what they're pursuing. And instead it's like, I'll mess with people like, oh, thank you for changing my opinion with your well thought out and articulate argument. I really am now thinking about this differently. I hope you have a great day. Yeah. And they're just like, fuck you, and they don't comment anymore.
Right. Yeah, kill them with kindness. Or what is that? What's that? There's an old saying. It's I think it's actually in the Bible somewhere, where it's like it's a soft answer breaketh the bones, or something like that. And so it's like when someone's coming at you hard, you give them a soft answer and it just breaks their bones, like, yeah.
I can see that.
An old proverb or something. I don't know.
I definitely want to talk about your organization, but we got to build up to that. So we got to go back in time. So are you from
Rewind,
Wisconsin?
Yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Is that how you?
No, I don't. No, we don't. But yeah, I grew up in the land of cheese and cornfields and cows. Yeah, but I grew up in Milwaukee, so it's like I actually kind of grew up in the city. Mm-hmm. But I grew up in a I just dropped a biblical reference there. I grew up in a independent fundamental Baptist, uber Christian, uber conservative church, and that church was life. So you went to the church-run school, which had 70 kids in it, and that was kindergarten through 12th. I had 5 other kids in my grade growing up.
Oh damn.
Yeah, it was interesting, but it was all I knew. It was actually a really good childhood. It was really cool, looking back at it now. But being a part of that was interesting. Right around the age of like 14 or 15, I started, kind of looking around, seeing other things in the world, and I saw the military stuff. And my dad was he was a flight engineer on C-130s.
Okay.
So he had been over to Iraq. Actually, he got over there, I think, like a week before they caught Saddam Hussein. So he got over there, flying around C-130s. So back in, like, was that 2003?
Yeah. How old are you?
27.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm a baby. I know.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, if your dad was over there. Okay, I'm just kind of putting some context to this. All right, so do you remember 9/11?
Yeah, I was in 4th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything from 4th grade.
Oh, really?
I don't remember what I had for breakfast, though.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I remember I remember 4th grade, but I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning either. Yeah. So I don't know what that says about me. But I remember it. They they called us into the chapel and brought us all in, and they were like, hey, some airplanes hit the World Trade Centers and placing. Of course, as a kid, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably right at the cusp of you understanding maybe the significance of those events.
Yeah, it didn't quite hit me, but yeah, I went home, saw the the towers fall and all that stuff. Saw the reruns of it rather after I got home from school. But then it started hitting me though because I started, my dad got activated. He was a reservist, and he got activated, and they started doing a lot more training, and then he ended up deploying over there in 2003 or whatever. So he was so a lot of my I guess like formative years were him being overseas at 3 or 4 months at a time, and then back for 3 or 4 months at a time. They had this really weird rotation cycle.
The reserves do have a bizarre rotation cycle, and the National Guard is another one that gets me too. Those guys who are going over there for 12, 14, 16-month pumps.
Dude, that blows my mind.
Yeah, it blows my mind too, and I can't even imagine the impact. So how was that? So I have kids. My oldest now I have 16, 14, and 11, 2 boys and a girl. My last deployment was in 2010. So my son, let's see here, he was 7 or 8, so younger than you were at that point. What was that like? Did you know where your dad was going?
Oh yeah. It was at that point I was very aware of it. So it was a couple years after 9/11 happened. So at this point I think I'm in 6th grade, so I'm 11 or something like that. I definitely understood it. I was super proud of him, going over there. I remember specifically when they deployed, they all flew over there in their own C-130s, of course. So yeah, my dad was, we could see him up in the cockpit. We got to all be there when they were, taking off from the Milwaukee airport. And he's just up there flipping switches, doing his thing.
I forgot there's that third seat up there.
Yeah, he's the third seat guy. Yeah, he's the guy in the middle between the two pilots. Yeah. So he's in there flipping all the switches, doing all that stuff, and he took off. And I remember I started crying. 11 or 12 years old. I don't even know how old I was. I just started bawling because I was like, it's like, oh man, like my dad's going over there. It was a big deal to me. It wasn't out of fear. It was like there was like pride. There was a lot of mixed emotions going on. It's like, no, I don't have my dad around for a few months, and it was interesting. But I was super proud of him, and he wasn't his job wasn't infantry or anything like that. So he relatively safe job.
Relatively in air quotes, for sure.
Air quotes, yeah. There's one of the other airplanes actually got an RPG through the wing. One of the C-130s.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, they might.
Yeah.
They
didn't pull the safety. The safety that's on the tip of the RPG. Yeah.
I support it.
Yeah. They didn't pull the they didn't pull the pin.
I fully support them not pulling the pin on that.
I do too.
I'm completely fine with that. It's amazing that anybody has ever hit anything with an RPG, given how they just corkscrew through the air.
Yeah.
It's
so
every
bizarre.
time I watch it on TV where they're on a rope because they're literally on a wire because that's how they make them fly in the movies. I'm just like, no, that's not how that works.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that they put them on a wire and just have a little sparkler.
Were you a West Coast or East Coast guy?
West Coast, Team 1.
So did you go out to San Clemente Island?
Yeah.
Did you have them bring out, not you guys, did the training cell bring out the, what do they call, I mean, it's not pyrotechnics, even though that is an aspect of it. It was basically the smoke and mirror crew. They do special effects.
I don't think we had any super crazy special effects.
Because I've been out there.
We had a bunch of role players. But
yeah, a bunch of role players. I've been out there where they'll actually set up those wires.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's how they can get those
kidding.
things. Like if you watch, I was just making fun of the movie SWAT the other day. Because you're either SWAT or you're not.
You're not. Yeah.
And I was talking to a guy who was on SWAT for the majority of his career, and he could barely, contain his belly laughter at what was going on. But there was a law. One of the guys was, of course, internally shooting a law just from like a 3rd-story apartment complex.
Right, naturally.
And it just, you see the thing come down, and it reminded me exactly of the pyrotechnics they were bringing out to San Clemente Island.
Okay.
Yeah, so they put them on a wire, and it's just a little bit of a propellant that gets it to go and basically move.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I was wondering how they did that. But it's like way too slow.
It's too slow, and it's like a laser beam. I try to describe to people how RPGs fly, and it's like, well, take a paper airplane outside and make the wings totally different and throw it as hard as you can in the wind, and that little flight pattern, like that's basically an RPG.
Right. That's what you're gonna hit. Yeah, that's interesting. No, that's very true. Yeah, I don't know how they hit it. They probably were aiming in the wrong spot and somehow it hit that plane. Yeah.
So did you, when your dad was gone, how much did that sit on your shoulders with worry? Would you spend a lot of time thinking about or worrying about your dad?
I mean, there was no. I mean, I didn't really feel any worry. There was a tiny little bit of it, but I honestly was just mostly like pride. I was like, oh, my dad's over there. He's like, he's in the war. I was like, man, that's awesome. I wanted to go with him too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there wasn't a ton of worry. There was a little bit. It was the worst part of it was just kind of how it affected my mom. It was hard for her to for my dad to be gone for months at a time. And we're a real tight-knit family, super stable. We're just real nuclear family, old-fashioned 1950s style.
You got brothers and sisters?
Yeah, just one older brother.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was interesting seeing that effect on her. But to me, it wasn't that bad. But I was always super stoked when he got home, and he'd send us photos, back when the internet was like super slow. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
If you got like 3 photos, you're like, yes, yeah.
3 photos that took 30 minutes to download.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, the bar. Yeah,
the little bar, line at a time, man. Yeah, that's exactly how it was. It was actually funny though, because I loved the Band of Brothers. Loved that entire series. So
which one's your favorite?
Which episode?
No, you talking like the Pacific, or do you like the original one?
Oh, Band of Brothers.
Okay.
Yeah, the original.
Yep.
Kurahi.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's
so
a
good.
legitimate deployment series pretty much every time.
Yeah, it's so good. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, probably
Yeah.
2 or 3 times. Yeah. You're like, man, I wish we were doing this. Yeah.
I'll skip the trench warfare. Like, I'm all set on that. I don't need to have any part of that. But yeah, the rest of it, what a great job of storytelling and
for
talking
sure.
about the relationships. I mean, they did a pretty good job, I would say, too, from the essence of the military aspect and the combat. But what a great job telling the individual characters and the story arc of those, specifically, that regiment and all those people. Unbelievable.
Oh yeah, it's an incredible book. I think that was one of the first books that I ever read. As a kid. The first book I ever read was about Lawrence of Arabia. Randomly, I just pulled it off the bookshelf and ended up reading about this guy, which was awesome. But then I read Band of Brothers, an incredible book. And then you see it in the series. It's one of those situations where like the series is actually better than the book, in my opinion. But like if you read the book, then that some of the stuff that happened in Band of Brothers is like the real deal. I can't remember the guy's name, but one of them, he was a baseball pitcher and he took a grenade and threw it. He pitched it right at a German's head and exploded right next to him. I remember reading that in the book. And then there's just like a real short snippet. I think that's on episode 2 where they're taking out the guns and he just throws it and hits this guy in the head. And I'm like, oh, I remember that from the book. Yeah.
If only you could do something that cool in your life.
I know.
I
was
never
like,
have
man,
ever.
I know. That's why I was like, I gotta get a grenade kill. Yeah.
Grenades suck. Did you ever get to throw one?
Not in combat. I never used one.
They don't get to do much.
Yeah.
If it falls on its side, you lose about 50% of the effectiveness.
Really?
Because it's based on a grenade. The radius for injury and death is based on it basically sitting vertically.
What?
Yeah.
That's a terrible design.
Of course it is, because it's always laying on its side.
It's always on its side.
So half of it is going into the dirt or floor.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny. No, I've been in situations where like guys were throwing grenades into buildings to like drive ISIS guys down into tunnels or whatever. But that was pretty much it. I never.
Don't get me wrong. If people were throwing them in a building, I would be moving.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not going to sit there and watch the party favorite go off. It's just I wish it was like it was in the movies where you'd pull
Big
the pin
fire
on a frag.
explosion. Yeah.
And a 3-story building would collapse.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that was one of the big letdowns of being in the military was the explosions aren't fiery. They're just a big poof.
Even thermobarics. Like thermobarics do a pretty good job. I was impressed with those, but yeah, still not as impressive as what Hollywood wants to make things out to be.
Yeah. You're like, oh man, I wish things blew up in big fireballs.
So when did you start thinking about the military as you were growing up?
Well, I think probably close to around 14 or 15. Again, like how I grew up was basically if you wanted to like reach your full potential in life, you were either going to go be a pastor or a missionary. That's what you did. And I didn't. Yeah, and so in my mind, I was like, well, I'd rather go be a missionary than be a pastor, because being a pastor sounds boring. Like I want to see the world or do something different. But then over time, around the age of 14 or 15, I was just like, I started kind of seeing that the rest of the world didn't really act like we acted. Not that it was bad how I grew up, but it was like, I was like, this isn't for me. I'm not going to do this long term. And
How was that? Did you voice that to anybody?
Slowly at first, and then all at once.
How was it received?
My mother was terrified. She thought I was going off the deep end. Well, because I refused to go back to the school for my 11th grade year of high school. So right around 10th grade, I kind of started making this decision that I wanted to be in the military, and I made the decision that I wanted to be a SEAL specifically. And that was not very well accepted. I mean, they're not anti-military or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just, well, you're wasting this great opportunity to, go be a missionary or something. And I'm like, no. But yeah, that was not well received. I got called out in chapel. once. I got like in front of everybody for wanting to do that. And then I also had taken a picture of a seal, and he's like, jumping out of a helo or something, and I'd like put it on my locker because like other kids had decorated their lockers, and so I put a seal up there, and I was told to take it down because it was like a sign of rebellion or something. And so I put it on this. I kept that in this folder that I carried with me to all my classes, and it was one of those 3-ring binders, so I slid it in there so it's the cover. And somebody like took it and drew like an L on the on the seal's forehead kind of thing. And it wasn't like I wasn't horribly oppressed or anything. I'm not trying to say that, but it was definitely not accepted. So then my 11th grade year of high school, I was just like, I'm not going back to the school.
What was it that got you over that decision point?
What made me make that decision?
What led up to that, and then what was it that finally got you to verbalize you weren't going back?
Man, that's interesting. I think I was just diving into anything and everything that I could find about being a SEAL because it was so foreign from what I grew up with, and it was just this entire world. And I was like, well, I want to be a SEAL. I want to have the the mindset and the attitude of a SEAL, and I'm not going to let somebody else's opinion or the fear of rejection or fear of failure. I'm not going to let any of that stuff stop me. I'm going to do what I think I need to do to get there. And so I think that's just kind of, I don't remember if there was like one specific point, but then, I just told my parents, I think that summer going into my 11th grade year, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to go back. And
so were you using the internet? I mean, you were basically searching this information out on your own?
Yeah. I was just, I would just go on the internet. And I originally,
Damn internet.
Yeah, I know. Got another one. I got another one. Yeah, yeah. It was actually funny because I had seen Band of Brothers, and I grew up watching all these old like black and white World War II movies, with John Wayne and Sands of Iwo Jima and all those. But my dad, he let us watch Black Hawk Down, and I was like, oh,
how old were you?
That's the coolest thing ever. I don't know, probably 13 or 14.
Bold.
Yeah. And I was just like, that's the coolest thing ever. I want to do that. So my original intention was like, I'm going to be a Ranger because that's the only thing I knew about.
Yep.
And then I started researching all the different groups, and I kept on seeing stuff about SEALs. I was like, I'd heard of them, but I was like, I'm not that good of a swimmer. I didn't really know how to swim that well. I could do the doggy paddle, but no real swim ability. But yeah, then one day I was just sitting there, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna live my life in a way that where I'm going to give myself limits on things that I can't do. I mean, I'll choose to not do things, but like I don't want to not pursue something simply because I don't think I can do it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do the SEAL thing because it seemed the most challenging. It seemed to be the biggest challenge for me personally. And so, that's why I decided to do that. Told my parents, had this, big coming out of the closet moment, at school. I was like, hey,
it kind of sounds like it.
Yeah, it was kind of how it was a little bit. And then, yeah, but the funny thing was, so my parents wouldn't let me go to a public school though. So
how come?
Bad influence, drugs, sex, rock and roll, everything else that they had worked so hard to, keep me away from.
Shelter you from, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, shelter me from. And I appreciate it. Really great. I think that was a really good thing. I think up until like, I don't know, maybe 8th or 9th grade. And at that point you kind of like, all right, you got to start exposing yourself to the real world a little bit, in my opinion. But so I had to homeschool myself. So my parents bought this homeschool curriculum where you had to teach yourself how to do stuff. So there was no videos or anything. So I would get a book, here's on algebra, whatever, and here's a worksheet, and go to the library. And I was just sitting there like, okay, here's how I do this.
That sounds incredibly rough.
It was. I call it my year of darkness, actually. It's how I refer to it. Well, because also I was working third shift at McDonald's because they paid an extra like 75 cents if you worked third shift. So from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So I was working, I was only awake during the dark hours, and then I would go to the YMCA, and I joined a lifeguarding class to learn how to swim, which is counterintuitive, but I just like knew that would force me to learn. And so I go to the YMCA, drown for a little bit, try and figure out how to swim. And then I go to the library and try and teach myself algebra or whatever the different subjects were. And I did that for my entire school year. I completely lost all my friends, anybody and everybody that I knew. I didn't talk to anybody except for my immediate family for the most part.
Well, it sounds like you're on the opposite side of the clock for everybody. You're describing being active where most people are asleep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like as far as like my community, like I had lost that community. Like I didn't go to the church I also didn't go to the church anymore. I was like, I'm not going to church. I'm not.
How did the church treat you and the people who were at the church when you chose to stop going?
Everybody was kind, but it was like eyebrows raised, like, hey, you're about to ruin your life, that was kind of how it was. People definitely were not supportive of it, but I expected that, and it was like, all right, that's fine. And my
Did it
attitude
change your opinion of the church at all?
My opinion had already been kind of changed. I was looking for. I thought that church is a great thing, but you have to find balance in it. And my attitude was not I'm rebelling. That was my attitude. My attitude was like I respectfully disagree. You guys are taking this way too far, and that was the issue. Because like when I grew up, there was extreme rules. It was we call it legalism in religious terms. But it was just everybody. Girls have to wear skirts and they have to be 3 inches below the knee, and you can't go to movie theaters, but like you can watch movies at home, which is weird. Like there was no dating, there was no music with drum beats in it.
What?
Yeah.
What's the deal with the drum beat?
Satanic rituals. Boom, 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 boom.
Or AC/DC? What?
Oh yeah, AC/DC. Oh hell no. There was none of that growing up. No, you'd have gotten huge trouble for that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was an interesting transition. Ultimately, I'm glad that I did it. I became a lifeguard. Was able to quit working at McDonald's, and just luckily then my senior year, my parents let me go to a public school because they saw that I wasn't going out the deep end. They saw me working my butt off. They saw me, I wasn't out there, smoking pot and, going to parties and drinking. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I was like, no, I want to go be a SEAL. Like this is what I want to do. And so they, eventually were super supportive of it. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. Why don't you go do that? That's awesome. So I went to a public school, my senior year of high school. And when I was 17, when I enlisted, and my parents had to go in and sign the paperwork and all that jazz. Okay.
How was that senior year for you? That I'm going to have to imagine that was a drastic shift in exposure.
Yeah, the culture shock was definitely real, but it was the school that I went to was Ronald Reagan High School, and it was like a college prep high school, public high school. So it was kind of a different demographic of kids who were very interested in going to college. There wasn't a ton of sports, and so it actually wasn't that bad. I actually enjoyed my time there. It was pretty cool. Everybody thought it was from a different country because I acted weird and, dressed a little bit different. And my name is, Ephraim, so like, oh, what country are you originally from? I'm like, no, I'm here. I grew up, 3 blocks away over there. Yeah.
East by a stone's throw.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, that's a weird answer. But yeah.
So did you play sports growing up, or did you have the chance to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So one of the awesome things that actually about growing up in the church-run school was we had a sports program, which was basketball, because you don't have enough guys really to play any other sports.
I was going to say, when you were saying you had 5 people in your class, I'm like, well, baseball's kind of out.
Right. So we did have like a summer like little league that we would do just within the church. So it was like there was like 2 teams. And that was. At all the different age groups. But, we played basketball. Basketball was our big thing. And the church that I went to was actually on a basketball court. So we would set up like 300 or 400 chairs. Yeah. And we'd pull out these big mats, these big brown, I don't know, like plastic mats that covered the whole thing. And then we'd use this little crank system to pull the nets up. The nets up. Yeah. But yeah, so it was actually cool. We got to, I grew up playing tons of sports. Specifically basketball. We did a little bit of soccer, and I went to a football camp one summer, like a Christian football camp for like a week. Yeah, but yeah, it was an interesting experience.
As I'm listening to you talk about this, it's interesting is a good word for it. It's an atypical background, I would say, certainly for our career path.
Oh, for sure. And that's when the culture shock happened when I got into the Navy.
The Navy and the church environment, I'm sure we're almost identical.
Almost identical. Yeah. So graduated high school at 17, and then a few months later, after my 18th birthday, went off to basic training.
What year was this?
2010.
Oh, damn, dude! I was getting out of the military as you were rolling it in.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, so how was boot camp?
It was fine. It was kind of dumb. The whole thing was kind of dumb.
I describe it as comical. Now,
that's a good word.
It is.
Yeah,
comical. Now, be honest. Could you list 5 things that you learned in Navy boot camp?
No.
What did you learn in Navy? And I'm not trying to be negative about Navy boot camp, but people ask me all the time, "Oh man, how hard was boot camp?" I'm like, listen, Navy boot camp, from my understanding, is very different from Army and Marine Corps boot camp. And I know almost nothing about Air Force boot camp, so I can't really speak to it at all. But those jobs, Army and Marine Corps, they have a different defined end state for almost everybody who's in like a boot camp division, if they even call them that. They probably call them companies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, did you go through, so you probably went through the pre-training pipeline and all that?
Yeah, yep.
When I went in 96, there was like 4 people who raised their hand, and we watched this little bizarre video, and we we were just on the same train as everybody else, and we did all the firefighting stuff and the marching. I learned how to fold clothes and march. Those are the 2 things that I say.
Yeah.
And salute and understand the rank structure and all that stuff. But almost nothing that we did in boot camp, actually, you know what? Nothing we did in boot camp for the Navy was applicable to what we did in our careers.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Luckily, yeah, we did have
we knew the rank structure of the Navy.
Yeah, and how to wear your uniform and all that,
which I refused to do.
Yeah, yeah, that's so funny. It was interesting because we were part of that, or I was part of that generation where we had this kind of pipeline built for us. So like when we got,
tell me about that, because I get asked all the time about that pipeline.
Okay,
and I don't have an answer for it. So
gotcha.
Did you go in with a contract assuring you a spot in that pipeline?
Yes. So when I went into the recruiter, I you have to pass your PSTs and your physical screening test and all that stuff, and pass your ASVAB, all that jazz, and then you get a SEAL contract, just like you're going in, just like other people join the Navy and they're like, oh, I'm going to be a corpsman, I'm going to be a ET or whatever. Yep. Yeah. So, but what they did was when you got to boot camp was they put you in a division with about 100 other guys, and it's all guys who are going for special programs. So it's all SEAL candidates, EOD, SWIC, diver, and rescue swimmer. Those
would have been so nice in hindsight.
Oh yeah, it was actually wasn't bad at all, because we'd get done with the day and they turn off the lights and like guys would go into the bathroom and like actually get a workout in and whatnot. It was kind of funny.
I hope by that you mean like physical training.
Yes, physical training. Yeah, physical training was going on.
I don't want people to run away with their imagination. It is the
Navy. Yeah.
Therefore slightly gay, but
yeah, by default, naturally.
So who were the company commanders? Were they, or I'm trying to remember.
RDCs. They were just regular guys from the fleet. So
how cool would that have been if they came from one of those special communities? Like it was an EOD guy or a diver.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought it was going to be. So I show up and I'm looking at their uniforms. I'm standing at attention. I'm like constantly looking at their uniforms. I'm like, okay, I know that's not a trident. I know it's not an EOD pin. Are these guys like rescue swimmers? Are they SWICs? Like, okay, that's I don't see the dive bubble. So like I didn't know who they were or what they were for several weeks, and then I started looking. And I was like, oh, like that's your surface warfare pin or whatever. Yeah, and that's cool. But what they did have is they had they call it dive motivators, and so they had like 4 or 5 actual SEALs who were basically assigned to boot camp, and then they would just run the different divisions through workouts and stuff like that. So
you guys probably got more physical training, I would assume, in boot camp than a normal division, or was definitely more. But it still was like you got out of shape. I was just going to say exactly the same thing. Yeah. I got out of shape in boot camp, and fortunately, I had 8 weeks at OSA school in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
Because the pipeline I went through was boot camp, do your test on like the 4th week, the run, swim, pull-ups, push-ups.
Okay.
And as you know, the bar is not crazy high on that. Like if you stumble over that bar, the journey into that career path is probably going to be pretty painful.
Right.
And then boot camp, they gave me the list of schools that were available A schools, because Buds was not an A school yet. It's like, okay, that's 12 weeks. That's unacceptable.
Yeah. 16
weeks. That's unacceptable. Ooh, 8 weeks. I'll take it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And then I just worked out like a son of a bitch when I was at Virginia Beach, and then checked into Buds.
Okay.
With a rating already.
Right.
In case, the attrition rate being what it is.
Right.
So after the boot camp division, you stayed in Great Lakes, right? Because there's now an additional training pipeline.
Yeah, there's 8 weeks of I think they call it pre-buds, and it's just you work out twice a day. So you swim 5 days a week, lift twice, and run 3 times a week. So it's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday you're running, Tuesday, Thursday you're lifting, all 5 days you're swimming.
What do you do with the rest of your time?
Chill, hang out.
It sounds like you have a lot of time to yourself.
In the afternoons, it's sort of like a 9-to-5 job. You do these 2 workouts. There's a lunch break in there, obviously. But then, in the afternoons, you're just kind of chilling. Yeah, guys would go into town, or guys would, on the weekends especially, they'd go down to Chicago and whatnot. And it was, I didn't think that was a wise move, because you start losing guys pretty much immediately, because it's like, dude, you got to stay focused.
Well, discipline issues are going to happen. People are going to get in trouble out in town. Yeah,
which was super foreign to me because like nobody ever really got in trouble growing up because like, we all just kind of followed the rules. I was the rebel,
Yeah,
for joining the military. Yeah,
yeah, it was the exact opposite experience. There were plenty of people breaking the rules when I grew up and getting in trouble for it as well. Which I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe just a different context.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Were you guys staying in barracks?
Yeah, so they had us in barracks.
Okay.
So you're in a room with 3 or 4 other guys, and guys are washing out. There's other classes graduating before you, and it was kind of an interesting. So you graduate boot camp, at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're checking into your barracks, over
with
there,
your sea bag,
right across. Oh yeah, with your sea bag, and you're just like, oh man, we're out of boot camp. Yeah,
yeah,
that was interesting.
And then you graduate from that, and I'm assuming you go San Diego.
From right there, you go straight to San Diego.
How many people did they send at one chunk?
Oh man, it was several hundred.
Several hundred?
Oh yeah.
Jesus.
Oh,
Okay.
easily, yeah. So the class sizes when I got there, when you went into Bud's orientation, or I think they called it
Fourth
Indoc,
phase,
that stuff was, I think our classes, I want to say 350 to 400 guys.
That sounds actually about right. I guess
Okay.
I just didn't assume that many came directly from that pipeline, because
maybe like 2 to 300, because you had like officers and rollbacks and other
fleet
guys
people
who were
coming
there.
in,
and fleet people. Yeah.
It just
but the fleet guys went through pre-Buds as well.
did they really?
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea. Can you imagine trying to get ready for buds on an aircraft carrier or a frigate? That'd be challenging to say the least.
Oh, for sure.
That's actually a really good thing that they did that. Okay, so
it's mostly injury prevention because the same percentage of guys quit, but now you have less guys like getting ITB syndrome and other things.
Yeah, shin splints and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you check into buds. When did you check in?
What do you mean when?
What month? What year?
It was I was a summer class, so I checked in. I think I want to say.
Are we in 11 yet, or still
April?
in 10?
We're in 11.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like April, I believe, of 2011. Yeah.
Okay. Which buds class?
Hell Week with 289.
Yep.
And then I had a bulging disc from an officer who didn't want to put out. So
Stop it! That can't be the case.
That can't be the case. Luckily he got dropped. He got dropped from training. Yeah, he didn't want to carry his weight, so my back suffered for it. But then I went through the rest of the pipeline with 291, all the buds and SQT and all that jazz.
Damn, man, you were almost at my centennial class. I went through 212.
Oh, no kidding.
21 shy of my centennial class.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
It's back when buds was hard. It's not a big deal.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, it mostly was a correspondence course I've heard for you guys. So
yeah, it's NKO, Navy Knowledge Online.
That, by the way, is the most horrendous software ever. I was having to do.
Oh,
that
it's
stuff
so
too.
bad. It's so bad. And DTS.
Oh, the travel system.
Oh yeah,
the defense travel system.
Oh my word, it's so bad. It's so bad. I feel like if they got rid of that, I think that they wouldn't have to give bonuses to guys so much, because it's like it takes up so much of your day. You get off of your trip from Nyland, you spend a month in Nyland, just getting your nuts kicked from one of Jocko's training programs, and so then you're like, so then you get back and it's like, okay, we got a week before we got to go to SR or something
admin
else.
week.
Yeah, admin week, and it's like, oh dude, you got to do these different NKOs. I'm like, all right, I just did it. Well, you didn't print this thing out, so you got to redo it, and you're like, dude, you've got to be kidding me.
So for people who are listening who have no idea what we've been talking about for the last 2 minutes, NKO Navy Knowledge Online, you have a SEAL platoon's life is still basically 18-month chunks, right? Where you train and then you get ready to deploy, and usually it's a 6-month deployment. So that, like you're talking about, there's Nyland, there might be diving, there might be the jump stuff, or jungle warfare, or Arctic warfare. And then you come back and the Navy requires you to do additional online training in the weeks. Well, it's not necessarily in the weeks off, but that's the time that you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're balancing blowing shit up in the desert between, time doing that and time spent not trying to blow your own brains out sitting in front of a laptop learning about the Navy's piss test program.
Right,
essentially.
Right. And the laptops hardly ever work, and
Correct.
You're like, yeah.
And the connectivity is not that great. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's neither here. I mean, it's part of the job, but it sucks.
Yeah, well, they definitely didn't put that in the recruitment brochure.
Yeah, in the SEAL pipeline, there's no, 2-minute segment of people just blindly sitting in front of a laptop and getting to the last page of like 50 pages and hitting the wrong button and erasing their work.
Yeah,
and
the whole
losing their shit.
Right.
Yeah. So are they still doing dream sheets in second phase?
I don't think second phase, but then we did them in SQT. It was like dream sheet. You mean like where you want to go? Yeah. So we did that. We did those in SQT.
Okay, so I did not go through SQT. I went through STT. And I was actually one of the first classes. I was started at Team 5, and before I went through STT, which stood for SEAL Tactical Training, whereas SQT is SEAL Qualification Training, each team ran their own individual training before that. So a guy at Team 5, and when I went in, Team 5 was like Southwest Asia, so cold weather, and Team 3 was the desert. So we would actually get really different training, which, as you can imagine, is not great when an East Coast and a West Coast and multiple units collide somewhere in the world. And it's like, hey, man, why do you have that uniform?
Right.
Like, they're like, hey, man, where'd you get that? And you're like, shut up, dude, don't look at my stuff. You can't have It was a system that worked, but I think it's much better now that they have that pipeline. But in second phase, I remember this to this day. The instructors come in, all right, guys, it's time to fill out your dream sheet. And I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, and I figured, well, let's go check out the East Coast. So I put down 2, 4, and 8. I got to Team 5, because then I came to find out later that a dream sheet is exactly that, a pipe dream.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. That's hilarious.
And I put 2, 4, and 8, got Team 5, and I had a couple buddies in the class who were like, oh, yeah, I'm from the East Coast. I want to be on the West Coast. So they put like 1, 3, 5 and got 4.
Yeah.
They're like, what the hell, man?
Yeah. It was like, well, can we just switch orders? Like, no, that's way too complicated.
It was one of my first looks behind the curtain, like, oh, needs of the Navy is a thing, huh?
Yeah.
So.
No, I didn't personally experience that, but there was 2 guys in our class. One guy who wanted to go East Coast and one guy who wanted to go West Coast, and they flip-flopped him.
Oh, they did? They allowed them to?
No, it got messed up, and then they wouldn't let them change it up, and it was just like, dude, you've got to be kidding me. But so when I filled out my dream sheet, so with my generation of guys going through, it was at the back end of all the wars, so we didn't even think we were going to get to deploy into a combat zone for the most part. And so I actually requested SDV, which in hindsight, thank God I didn't get it. So
why would you ever do something like that?
Well, because I thought that they were going to be doing, I was like, well, they're the only ones that are actually doing real world, work. And so I requested it, and thank God I didn't get it.
I'm surprised you didn't.
Well, so they messed up the paper. That's how bad the paperwork was messed up. They also didn't send any of my guys to, or anybody from my class to corpsman school or to SOCM.
18 Delta.
18 Delta. Yeah, they didn't send anybody from my class because they messed up on the paperwork. So the class after us got double the amount of slots. So all of our rollbacks who got pulled for CQC or whatever different training, all those guys
took those, didn't they?
They took all those guys got to go to 18 Delta, and then they all a large portion of them didn't make it through or whatever. But it was kind of funny. So
if you didn't want to go to 18 Delta and you ended up there, that'd be a tough road to hoe.
Oh, for sure. But we had a bunch of guys that wanted to go, but guys that was just like not necessarily, hey man, you're going to be a breacher,
So I was a second phase instructor for 18 months, and the students would ask, they're like, hey, what do you think about SDV teams? And mind you, I've never been in an SDV team. I've seen one once, and I immediately turned around and went the other direction because I was terrified they would put me in it for any length of time, or somehow my association with it I would end up an SDV guy. And I'm saying this, SDV guys are awesome, but I don't like the theory of a mini submarine that can stay underwater for almost 18 hours.
Yeah.
Or in my mind, they can stay underwater forever. So the students would ask me about it. I'm like, and I would tell them, like, I don't know anything about SDVs, but here's what you should do. If given the choice between an SDV team and suicide, you should kill yourself.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
My second platoon, we actually had 2 guys transfer in from SDV teams into like a normal platoon at Team 1.
Real SEAL
Into a real SEAL team. Yeah.
I'm joking, SDV guys. I love you. I'm just joking.
But yeah, so they would tell us the stories, so we get to we'd sit there and hear the real deal. So they're sitting on some submarine for 6 months waiting to go get in their mini submarine to maybe go do a mission.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I dodged a bullet. Holy cow! Thank God I didn't go there.
And let's give them credit where credit is due. I mean, they're considered a national mission asset, and the stuff that they are doing is amazing. And I'll just leave it at that. Mm-hmm. But the frequency with which I think they're being able to do it, it's not awesome.
Right. Right. Yeah. But the stuff that they do is insanely cool.
Correct.
You're like, whoa. Yeah. We obviously can't talk about that, but yeah, that was just kind of interesting. But I ended up getting assigned to No Fun 1, which was I put SDV West Coast, 357.
Yep.
And they
Why
put
didn't
me
you
at
put
Team
1
1.
down?
I'd heard the rumors, man. Well, actually, at the time,
that was from my generation, man.
Oh, dude. Well, at the time, Team 1 was still only deploying to PACOM, so they weren't even in the rotation to go to the Middle East. And so I think like 20 guys from my class got put in that platoon. And then right when we got there, luckily they changed it up, and I was just so happened to be in a troop that was getting to go to Afghanistan. So
how was
ended up being the best thing?
How was SQT? I never experienced what you went through. So did you do the jump portion right after Buds?
So we didn't go. You're talking about Fort Benning and all that?
No, like in Otay.
Oh no, we did that all the way at the end. But yeah.
Oh, so you okay? So
we left Buds. Went to Alaska for a month, and then it was like diving, MAROPS, CQC again.
How'd you like Alaska?
Oh, it was great. It was super cool, and we were there at the perfect time too, because we got to. I think we were there in like, I want to say like March or something. So we were there in the snow. We got to experience the snow
actual
stuff.
Arctic. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the last, I don't know, probably 10 days or so of it, like spring hit, and so we got to see the green and experience that. So it was cool. We got to see both aspects of it. But then at the end, one of the last schools is jump school out at Otay.
How'd you like that?
It was good. I had on my 11th jump though. I had one of my chutes didn't open, so I had to cut away.
Hopefully, it was your main chute.
It was my main chute.
I was going to say here, you only got 2 to choose from.
Yeah. Like I got a third one in my pocket. That was interesting. So it was my 11th jump ever.
Are you including your static line jumps in this too?
No.
Okay.
Not in the 11th. No, it was my 11th free fall jump.
Okay. What happened?
And man, it was just like a streamer or something. I jumped out. I went, went vertical, so my chute did deploy.
Yeah.
And so this is funny. When I talk about complacency, I didn't check my parachute. That was the one time I didn't check my parachute. You're supposed to look up and check it.
You're just like looking out at the horizon.
That's exactly what I was doing. I was like, yep, okay, cool, I got this. This is my 11th jump. I've done this 10 times. And it was funny because...
So hold on, you've done this 10 times and you're already ridiculously complacent.
Oh yeah.
So you're just looking at the reservoir and the border down to Tijuana.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh, look at this. That's beautiful. And the only reason I looked up was because I was like, wow, there's air going up my nose really fast right now. And I was in the process of storing my ripcord on my wrist, but when I looked up and my chute's just dancing around like a ball of laundry.
So you were deep into not paying attention at all.
I was it was just like, oh my word, like my chute didn't open. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And the funny thing is too, like I'm looking at it and I honestly got mad. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. Like I did not want to cut away because I was terrified to do it. I was like, I don't want to cut away. I watched it. And then I just like looked down on the ground. I was like, no, I got to do this. Checked my. Then I locked in. I was like, all right, cool. It's game time now. And checked my altitude. I was good to go. So, went through my cutaway procedures. Went back into free fall, which was like the most terrifying, 3 seconds of my life until that second chute opened. But then it was funny. I went up to grab my risers, and my hands were shaking so bad, just from the adrenaline, and that I had to use like my thumbs on both. I used both my hands just to pull one riser down. So then I kind of go into this like little spin as I'm like trying to get the other one. But yeah, there's no more complacency.
Did you throw your cutaway pillow and reserve ripcord, or did you have them in your hands when you came down?
I discarded as was what we were taught, and then I got yelled at for it later. Well, not like one of the drop zone people, like one of the civilians.
People are like, "Oh, dude, you got to pay for those things."
Well, they were like, "Yeah, why don't you have a ripcord?" And I'm like, "Well, because the very first step is discard. Arch. Then you go through your look red, grab red. Yeah.
It's different worlds. Civilian jumping. Every time I've had a cutaway, I hold on to them and I just stuff them down my shirt because it's like $150 to replace those things.
Oh, really? That's funny.
When Uncle Sam's stroking the check, though, throw that thing like your life depends on it.
Yeah. There was like it was a let it go.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, and that's why they get torqued about it on a DZ. Is they're like, "Oh, dude, you gotta, you pussy, you threw him." It's like, well, first off, if I want to throw it, I'm gonna throw it.
Right.
And second off, if I need to write a check to get more of them, then maybe I'll just write a check to get more of them.
Right.
So just back off.
Well, yeah, but that was the procedure that we practiced every single day. Yeah, and it was just like, and then this lady like yelling at me. I'm like, "What? Get out of my face!" Like get out of here. It's like I have nothing to say to you. That was interesting. But then like a couple weeks later after that, SQT graduation.
Are we into 12 yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're late into 12. We're August, September 2012.
What's the time, the length of SQT?
6 months, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of like doing Bud's timeline all over again, but it's more of like a gentleman's course.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of fear put into you by the instructors, but for the most part, it's they're just teaching you.
Did you lose any guys?
Yeah.
What did you lose them for?
CQC, safety violations, all kinds of just random little stuff. I don't think there was any I think there was one guy with like a disciplinary issue, drinking or whatever.
Yeah, probably alcohol related incident.
Yeah. But I'd say we probably lost, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10% of the class. Maybe we lost like
lost or recycled.
I think we lost. Well, okay, that's a good question. A lot of guys got rolled, but then a lot of those guys who got rolled ended up getting kicked out.
That sucks.
Because also too, there's so many guys in the pipeline at that point. They weren't hurting for recruits. So it was if you weren't passing muster, you were given one performance roll.
Yep.
If it didn't happen for you, all right, cool.
See you later.
Yeah,
don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out.
Exactly.
I think it should be that way.
No, I thought that was great, and I thought that was good too because it was like, hey, hold the standard up high. That way, you haven't dealing with a more qualified individual or whatever, because also that adds to the stress of it too, right? So combat's extremely stressful, and you just have to like function underneath that, under that stress. You just have to like function and just do your job. Where it's like pool comp, right? You're like, I can't breathe, but I'm just going to go through my procedure. It's not complicated. Yep. You just have to be able to do that under duress. And so when you're getting tested in SQT, if there's no threat of you getting kicked out, then how are you supposed to simulate danger? How are you supposed to simulate stress?
Yep.
And actually test people.
Simple, not easy. The procedure, following your procedures under extreme duress.
Extremely simple steps, but
yeah,
that's when you got to play the mental game and calm yourself down and just focus and do what you got to do.
So late 12, you're checking into. I can't believe you called it No Fun 1. That was definitely a moniker that came from my era.
Oh yeah, there were guys. They had patches on. It said No Uno Ne. It looked like Latin, but it was spelled out No Fun 1.
Oh my! At Team 1.
Yeah, guys would roll out their little patch, not on like their dress uniforms, but like on their tactical uniforms. Yeah.
It's because nobody speaks Latin.
No Uno Ne. Yeah.
Skipper's probably like, that's awesome. Does that mean warrior in battle? And the guys are like, uh-huh.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it does.
So how was that for you, leaving a training environment and checking into your first operational SEAL team?
It was pretty cool. Honestly, like I still wasn't socially adapted enough, which I know sounds weird, but, from how I grew up, but then, when I even going through buds and SQT and then getting to my team, like I just didn't fully understand like the, I guess like the culture 100% yet. So for me, I felt very awkward, when I went there. Also, I was the only guy from my entire class who got pulled away from the rest of my class and got put into a platoon by myself so I didn't know anybody in the platoon. Everybody else went to a new platoon with at least 2 or 3 buddies from training. Mm-hmm. I was the only guy in my class that went to a platoon.
You're talking your SQT class?
Yeah, my SQT class, yeah.
They just had one opening for a guy in that platoon?
In that platoon, and I was the guy that went to that platoon.
Okay.
But it wasn't bad. It was a good group of guys. It was a bit of a culture shock, and then you're like, all right, cool. But then I eventually figured it out and was like, okay, this isn't so bad. And then I got to do the comm school JTAC stuff, and we deployed 2014 out to Afghanistan. We were one of the last platoons out there.
Did you get a full 18-month workup?
Yeah, we did a full 18-month workup. So I got to do that whole deal. But yeah, we went out to Afghanistan. But it was weird though too, because when we got to Afghanistan, they sat us down, and as soon as we get in there, intel brief, they're showing us this map of Afghanistan. They're like, yeah, we don't control this, we don't control that, we don't control this, we don't control any of this. And it was just so they were showing us the different spots that we did control, and it was like nothing.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of eye-opening, and it was like, whoa, I thought we were crushing it. No, we don't control anything. The Taliban controls everything. So that was...
As they did, I think, pretty much since the first day that we got there.
Okay.
I mean, well, you got to think about it.
And for the last 2,000 years.
And for the last 2,000 years, but think about it. I mean, how many soldiers are we willing to send over there? Because for us to control the entire country, we would probably have to send over 10x. Yeah. There's always going to be little small areas and avenues and corridors, but as we drew down, I think the influence of having people on the ground also drew down, which should be expected, right? Mm-hmm. You can only reach out and touch so far, but I don't think there was never a point in my understanding where the Taliban was completely on the run.
Oh, of course not. And then they had Pakistan. So they're all hanging out in Pakistan as well.
Or Waziristan. I mean, more, the tribal area in between, which is, I would describe as the Wild West.
Is that the Pashtun? Is Waziristan Pashtun? Or?
I don't know, actually. But I also, from my understanding, neither Afghanistan nor Pakistan really claim that particular area, which is why it's so much in the Wild West.
Yeah.
It's like both are like, hands up in the air. We're not going to hear no evil, see no evil, say,
Right.
you know what I mean? They're just like, nope, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's just tons of weapons and just tons of training camps, and they just play the border however
No, it's a
however they
dumpster
want
fire
to.
for sure.
Yeah,
They know
it's
that
so
they can go
bad.
back and forth. And,
Yeah.
and what sucks is, at least when I was there, like we knew they were there too, but had no authority to go do anything about it. Unless
Right.
you're in an Apex JSOC unit, you're not going cross-border.
Right.
I mean, and there's obviously Hot Pursuit, which have fun articulating that over radio to a CG, a commanding general that's nowhere near where you are in a talk
Right.
somewhere that probably has a Timmy Hortons on the. It's like you're not doing it.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was always interesting. Yeah, I was RTO radio man.
Yeah.
So it was always interesting, reporting back to HQ, and they're just and like, dude, you guys have salsa dancing on Tuesday nights, and we're out at this, we're out in the middle of nowhere, just
People will hear that and they'll be like, no, they didn't.
yeah, like
yes,
they did. They had no, that's an actual thing. Yeah, so for anybody listening, no, that's an actual thing. They had salsa dancing. I was like Tuesday or Thursday nights.
It could have been Tuesday and Thursday.
It could have been. Yeah. Depends on when the instructor's available or not on duty.
Oh God.
Yeah, so you're like trying to report back, and you're like, "Hey, we need this, we need that." Luckily, the group that was in charge of that SOTF, that task force, they were actually pretty cool. So they didn't give us any grief.
Where were you guys in Afghanistan?
Logar,
southeast. Okay, so you probably were reporting back to Kandahar.
No, we were reporting to Fob Shank.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. We're down there, and then I was in a DSP, a district stability platform, kind of out near the.
They've changed that name of that so many times.
Yeah,
from
yeah.
DSO to
village stability operations to district stability platform. It's all the same thing. It
is.
Why do you think
they?
I
changed the name
I
so
think
many
it's
times.
It's because the new general's taken over, and he's going to change the way we're doing things, folks. And I'm going to get that next star. That's probably what it is. Because I have a plan to win the war. That's exactly what I think's going on.
God, I wish I could say I didn't agree with that, but
that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, everybody wants to leave their mark in some way, and maybe if you change the acronym, it makes a difference. How long were you guys there for?
Man, we were only there for in country, I think 4 months.
Really?
It was retrograde. So also
they were rolling you guys out.
Yeah, so the entire time that we were there, we knew that we were going to be burning the base, hopping on helos, and flying out of there at the end of it.
Destroying the base.
Yeah, and I wasn't there for that because as soon as we stopped combat operations, I was sent to backfill more JTACs in the Cree because all those guys had just pushed into Iraq to start dropping bombs on ISIS because ISIS was this new organization at the time in 2014.
They just changed the acronym.
They just changed the acronym.
Somebody on their side wanted to get their start.
Some caliph was like, no, I'm gonna get my next caliph star. Yeah.
At least the tomfoolery occurs on both sides.
Yeah, that's true.
Because from an ideology perspective, I mean, the Taliban, I would say, is different ideology than ISIS or Al Qaeda. I mean, I'd equate Taliban to largely being they're thugs. You know what I mean? I'm sure they have a similar ideology, but I think they're driven by it less. The ISIS, Al Qaeda, and whatever that'll spin off into. I think those guys are much more devout. My experience with the Taliban were just like, listen, dude, like I'm kind of the muscle in this area, so back off.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's more like tribal control. We're the big kids on the block.
We don't hear of any Taliban in Syria or Turkey or anywhere, basically outside of Afghanistan.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's just their territory. They're going to hang out there.
Like I said, they're kind of thugs and whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is.
How busy were you guys when you were out there?
Actually, pretty busy. It was great. So because we were retrograding, they were also going to be getting rid of Fob Shank, which is a big air base, which has plenty of landing strips. I think they could land C-17s. I know for sure C-130s, but I think they could land C-17s, but I'm not sure. So big runways, big base. So we were the farthest guys out into the southeast at that point, and there was a valley coming out of Pakistan going up toward Fob Shank, Haqqani network. Yeah, Taliban dudes are just unlimited ammunition, unlimited weapons, unlimited manpower, and so our job was just to go out and just do daylight disruption operations, just go patrol the contact basically. So it was ironic because when I was in the teams, I was like when I started learning the different tactics and the different ways that we did things, I was like, okay, this is not going to be like Band of Brothers. But when we got to Afghanistan, it was exactly what it was. It was tree line to tree line fighting. but you're fighting over, like an Afghan, cornfield or whatever, or whatever they're grown there, as opposed to like hedgerows in Normandy. But it visually was the same exact thing.
Very
so,
similar.
Yeah, so the Taliban's 25 yards away. You line up all your guys, they line up all their guys, and you just have at it. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. Got to see a lot of I guess we basically were like running around, like basically acting as infantry. Well, we weren't allowed to do anything at night. ROEs or rules of engagement.
They had completely shut it down?
Yeah, rules of engagement. You cannot engage at night. We couldn't do direct action. So
what if you were engaged at night? Could you return?
Oh yeah, for sure. So we could only like insert at night. So we would patrol out or vehicle convoy out at night. But then as soon as the sun came up, then we could
game on.
Then it was game on. But,
okay.
But the Taliban knew that too. So. It was usually pretty quiet at night. We didn't do anything super crazy. But yeah, there was no direct action missions were allowed. So if you knew where a cell was at or a leader was at, we were not allowed to actually go and prosecute the target, which was super frustrating.
It's frustrating.
Oh, it's extremely frustrating. Yeah, so we're basically acting as just this multi-million-dollar infantry unit.
What are your thoughts on that?
On not being able to
having the training that you do and the technology and the tactical savvy and then not being allowed to use it.
Oh, it was super frustrating. It was extremely frustrating. And that's part of why I do what I do now as well. Because I started just realizing, well, I was looking at, okay, we're on this deployment fighting this war that we just lost, or territory that we just lost. Like we didn't win. By any objective measure, we didn't win. And that's super frustrating. And so it's like, okay, what are we out here fighting and potentially dying for? Luckily, we didn't take any casualties on the American side. But so that was kind of frustrating. It was like, why are we here? And I started kind of realizing that, that we were losing the war. So that was, but I didn't really care because at that point it was, you're just going to do what you need to do for your platoon. Yeah. My country wants me here. I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to
You're not thinking at a geopolitical spectrum.
No, not at all. Not at all. Or, yeah. So, but then it was very frustrating because it was like, okay, if we are going to be out here, like it's real bullets flying. It's real life and death, so let us use our tactics. It's like you wouldn't put a UFC
fighter...
Or
tactical advantage.
Or a tactical advantage, yeah. It's like you wouldn't put a UFC fighter in and be like, who's a really good jiu-jitsu guy. You wouldn't put him in the ring and be like, hey, man, like, you got to keep it on your feet.
Head kicks only.
No going to the ground, yeah. You're like, what are you talking about? Like, no, like, that's where I thrive. And, so that was kind of frustrating. But yeah, it was just a weird thing because like we knew we were leaving. The Afghan allies we were working with knew we were leaving, so they're stealing all of our stuff. It was bizarre, but I understood like the historical significance of where we were at and what we were doing. But it was definitely kind of disheartening to be in this war where it's like, hey, we're not hunting down the enemy so much. We're just kind of patrolling to contact and then smoking them. We're basically just dangling ourselves out there like bait.
Which is by doctrine not the definition of what a SEAL should be doing.
Exactly. It was actually interesting. We had a group of guys from the 82nd Airborne who were attached to our DSP, our little compound out in the middle of nowhere, and they were basically tasked with border security and just manning the watchtowers and all that stuff. Because it was a small little place, out in the middle of nowhere. But they integrated in with us, no problem. So we would, as like a thank you, we would, because they did great work, we would bring out a squad of them, and they integrated with us, no problem. So we'd have like a four squad SEAL platoon, and then there's a fifth squad of paratroopers, and there was no issues with integrating them at all because all we were doing was just
infantry tactics,
daylight infantry tactics.
It's a bizarre thank you.
Yeah, but everybody wanted to go, man. Yeah,
it's better than a gift card, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
$50 at Applebee's.
Yeah, no, they loved it. It was good.
So you rotated out to the CRE, which, correct me if I'm wrong, stands for Crisis Response Element.
Yep.
What exactly? I was never a part of that, and they were kind of standing that up as I was getting out. What? How would you describe that element?
Standby unit for if something crazy happens.
Where do they stage? Is it on a boat or is it on land?
No, you're on land. It's in the UAE somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little base out there. But yeah, you're not doing anything. You're on this little base. There's nothing to do. You can go Abu Dhabi or Dubai or whatever. But you're using that also as a staging point to go and do like joint training, JSETs.
Yeah.
And SMEs, subject matter expert exchanges. But yeah, you're just basically on standby in case something does happen.
And from my understanding, when it comes to the Cree, things don't happen that often.
No, the damn net guys are going to handle it.
Yeah.
If anything actually happens, like, yeah. Like the next time Captain Phillips gets captured, like, you're not sending the Cree, like, you're going to send.
That's what I had thought when people were describing to me what it was. And again, it's, by doctrine, there are already elements and units and commands that exist to fill that role. Like, I get it at a conceptual level, but it's like,
Right. Yeah, it's like you have reserves, but you don't need the reserves.
Yeah.
Like, hey, send them out.
Which becomes really frustrating for the people who put their heart and soul into training and go there with the hope and potential expectation of doing something, and then they sit there twiddling their thumbs, and they're like, hey, man, this community sucks.
Dude, guys would do an 18-month workup, same as everybody else, and then if you would just so happen to be an Alpha platoon instead of being an Echo platoon, guess what? Alpha platoon's going to the Cree. So you'd have an 18-month workup, and you're going to sit there for 6 months, maybe do some J-sets, maybe do some training. But the reason I got pulled over there was because the JTAC they sent all their JTACs into Iraq, so they actually did get to go do something, but they weren't actually allowed to get into contact. So they were sent out to Baghdad. So the guys that were there
to advise and assist, essentially, for overhead cover.
Yeah, to set up all that stuff, because they were literally. It was funny. Some of my best buddies were over there, and they were they said they were getting like lock cutters and just opening up all the old buildings that had just been abandoned in Baghdad, and there was opening back up, building sandbags, building fortifications, and just dusting off the Humvees and stuff that was left there. And I was like, what is going on? But yeah, then they started calling in just a bunch of airstrikes on ISIS. So that was kind of interesting. So I just kind of hung out there.
So you backfilled them at the Cree?
Yeah, I kind of hung out with the guys who were left behind at the Cree.
Okay.
Yeah, which was it actually ended up being kind of fun for me because I was the only JTAC, so we did some good training with in like Bahrain and a couple other places, and just got some really, really good per diem. Got to hang out on some ships, fly around on some helicopters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better than twiddling your thumbs for sure.
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah, getting paid that good money too.
So then you rotated back at some point, I'm assuming.
Yeah, rotated back, and then 18-month workup, started all over again. And this at the end of that workup, we ended up going to PACOM.
Okay.
And that's when I was like...
Philippines, correct?
We didn't... No, we stationed out of Guam, actually. I never went to the PI.
Okay.
I think they pulled everybody out of the PI.
Probably a good call.
Right before, yeah. So we stationed out of Guam, sort of like a Cree, but you're just basically a Pacific version of the Cree. And, so we just did a bunch of J-sets, Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, a couple other places.
My second pre-9/11 deployment was to Guam. You guys probably stayed in the same barracks complex that we did.
Yeah, probably.
Many years before, yeah.
Yeah. I imagine so. Yeah, they were run down, like, oh, wow, graffiti from other team guys that were here. Generations before. And
then it sounds like, given the fact you're only 27, which is ridiculous, you probably had to have gotten out shortly after that.
I was deployed in 2016 to PACOM, and we got back, and I was my last day of service was April of 2017, and I was like, yeah, I'm out. Like, I can't. Like, there's just no way.
What was it that got you over the tipping point to get out versus stay in?
Well, obviously there's an accumulative effect. I think it was just that PACOM deployment where I just sat there and I realized I was like, dude, there is no way I can do another 18-month workup to do a 6-month deployment, and there's no way I'm gonna go be an instructor right now. Dude, I'm trained, I'm ready. Like, let's go do the job. So that was it was very frustrating. But then also too, and I guess this kind of segues into like what I do now. I was very aware of all these different wars and things that are happening. And when I joined the SEAL teams, my thought was, okay, I'm going to be doing Tears of the Sun. Like, we're going to go in and we're going to schwack a bunch of bad guys who are trying to rape and pillage and burn some village. That's what I'm going to be doing.
Terrible movie, by the way. Let's just
I personally enjoy it just for the idealism of it. But
how dare you?
Yeah, I do. Well, Bruce Willis, come on, man.
Again, how dare you?
But yeah, like that was my thought. I was like, okay, we're gonna go do that stuff using proper tactics, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not what we did. So like I think like the final breaking point for me was we spent like 6 weeks in Thailand, and I was just, dude, I lost my mind, just super depressed, super angry. And I had heard about like the war that's going on like in Burma, right? It's the world's longest running civil war. It's been going on for now 71 years in January. And I was like, dude, we have a full platoon of SEALs here, fully capable, fully funded, have everything we need. And we're like a 45-minute helicopter ride, or maybe 2-hour helicopter ride from some village that's getting overrun. Women are getting raped. Everybody's getting, all kinds of horrible things are happening. And I'm like, I signed up to go help those people. I'm idealistic probably to a fault.
I was going to say, conceptually, you signed up to do that.
Yes.
From a technical perspective, you did not.
Right. From a technical perspective,
you signed up to execute the foreign policy of the United States of America.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why, and I was like, cool, I get it.
Yep. But I also understand why that would grate on you because,
yeah.
I felt fortunate that I experienced pre-9/11, so I could see what the SEAL teams were before it became the war machine that it did become.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can only imagine how difficult it is for guys to come in a wartime environment, to have that thought process, and then have it be like what it was for me pre-9/11. The difference was, there was no war for me to have experience or to feel like I was missing out on. Obviously,
right.
Stuff was still going on in Burma, but I mean, let's be honest, as a country, we were paying probably far less attention to that type of stuff.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So I was just like, okay, this is the way the SEAL teams are.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been hard to go post 9/11, join expecting one thing, and then get force-fed the pre-9/11 model.
Right, and that's what the generation of guys is going through right now.
That's got to be tough. I would imagine you are not the only person who had, having these thought processes. I'm sure it was probably a conversation point in the platoon that you guys were with.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Oh yeah, hate circles. Hate circles started every 5 minutes.
Strong.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Every morning. Hey, what's up?
The hate
man? Hey,
is strong in those.
Yeah, it was so bad. Oh man. Yeah, the angst was real. And also during that time too, there was a platoon that had gone to Iraq, and that was when Chuck Keating, Charles Keating, had been killed. And I didn't know him personally. Like I said hi to him in the hallway, but I didn't know him well at all.
He was a good guy.
Okay, yeah. By everybody like that knew him was like, dude, he's like such an awesome guy. And we were all like pretty torn up about it because we're just like, we wanted to go fight. We wanted to go do our job. We wanted to go, schwack some ISIS fools. But yeah, we're just hanging out in Paycom. Yeah, and so that to me was like a big turning point in my life where I was like, it was reminiscent back to being in like my 10th or 11th grade year of high school, where I was like, I'm not going back to the school, and it was kind of like, yeah, I'm not doing another workup. I'm gonna get out. And in hindsight, I'm really glad that I did. So what I chose to do was I had seen kind of like how the civilians and whatnot were affected in Afghanistan. I was in a situation where I almost killed a couple little girls because the Taliban had thrown like IED backpacks on them. And I don't know if they actually had explosives in it or not, but very clearly they were there for us to shoot them. That was very clearly the intent. And that tore me up, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, look at these little girls getting, pulled into these fights, and that really, really made me angry. And so I got out, and what I decided to do is like, well, I'm just going to go volunteer in Iraq as a humanitarian. I was like, well, I can go, if I can pick up a gun and protect some people if something happens, great. If not, if all I'm doing is handing out water bottles and Band-Aids, cool, great. I'm totally cool with that too. But I was like, I just got to go see, like, I like there's a war on, and this was like the height of the fight against ISIS. And I was like, well, I'm going to go see what I can do to help. So I actually took terminal leave in early 2017. And I had this idea. What I wanted to do was start a organization where former special ops guys could go in and protect and assist people in conflict zones as like a nonprofit type thing where you're going over there doing humanitarian stuff, and if stuff pops off, great, you're the right man to be there. And so I flew to Iraq.
So I mean, when you say fly to Iraq, like there's a lot of things conceptually that are interesting. You want to go to a war zone as a humanitarian. I mean, what do? Go onto Google and type in?
Yeah, great question. So my brother, he had done a bunch of humanitarian work all around the world, and so he had met different like humanitarian groups and whatnot.
Had he done that through the church?
Through different churches and different organizations and stuff. But so he had been all around the world. He did like an 11-month trip around the world, spending like a month in 11 different countries.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool getting to experience all that. So he put me in contact with some guys that were working over there. And so I just emailed them and was like, hey, I'm a former team guy, or I'm about to get out. Can I come volunteer? And again, with the intention, I'm going to start my own organization, but just kind of want to see how things work. So I got over there, and
what was your expectation on your way over there? What did you think you would be doing?
My expectation was I figured I'd be handing out water and food, and I imagine there'd probably be bombs that would go off, like IEDs. I imagine I'd be potentially treating a couple of wounded civilians, maybe. Not at all, which is not at all what ended up happening. It ended up being 1,000 times worse than that. It ended up just being a complete and utter, it was insane. It ended up being completely insane what happened over there. But I got over there, met up with these other guys, and a couple days later, so I just landed in Erbil in a civilian, just booked a flight,
Did you really?
Oh yeah. Just google.com/flights, what you got going into Erbil. Yeah. So flew into Erbil. These guys picked me up, and some of the guys were ex-military, most of the guys were ex-military.
What'd you bring with you?
Just like my clothes, and like, I guess like tactical clothing was pretty much all that I brought with me, in a backpack.
That didn't set off any alarm bells? People going through security?
No, there's tons of contractors going through there. Yeah, if anything, I fit in with all these other guys that are there to be, contractors on all the different bases and stuff.
Yep.
Of course, everybody's wearing their American flag hats and their, cargo pants.
So
and all
they were
that.
undercover.
Yeah, super undercover, incognito.
Yeah.
So it was actually funny because I ended up being undercover with them, going through, ironically. And so the guys I was working with, they'd already built a relationship with the Iraqi Army's 9th Armored Division. Okay. And so we hopped in a couple Land Cruisers. Oh, so before we went out though, we did go to like the local bazaar, and I got like a Rhodesian vest, so I could throw some AK mags. And they're like, yeah, don't worry, we'll get you an AK. They had like an AK and some like Chinese grenades and stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. And they gave me like this Yugoslavian AK. And I got the nice one because I was also sniper qualified. So they were like, this one shoots kind of straight. So I was like, okay, cool. But then,
so who's this just brings up so many questions to me.
Yeah.
So you're a civilian being armed in a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
You're an American, still technically in the military.
Still technically in the military, on leave.
On leave.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you didn't put on your leave chit or bill.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
I did not.
Being armed in a country that is at war with an American presence, whose authorities were you operating under? Who were you legally responsible to?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Who gave you your ROEs?
There were none. So I was there operating like with the humanitarian organization, and who just so happened to also carry weapons with them. And the weapons that were there were like taken off of like dead ISIS fighters or like given to them by the Iraqi army. So we're there as like, all that stuff was purely self-defense. You're not there. We're not like, oh, we're kitting up to go fight ISIS. It wasn't like that at all. It was like, we're in this convoy of 3 or 4, Land Cruisers, thin-skinned Land Cruisers with a bunch of food and medical supplies in the back, and we've got a red crescent and a red cross on the side, and we're going to drive in and help the Iraqi army. And the Iraqi army was totally cool with these group of guys being there, because they built up a relationship over time. And our job was to do humanitarian stuff, but ISIS is everywhere. Obviously, there's Hashd al-Shabi around, Iranian-backed militias. It's literally the Wild West at this point. And so, you're able to just carry weapons because everybody's carrying a weapon. It's not a big deal. Can
you use them in an offensive nature, or does it have to be defensive? Do you have to wait for a hostile act, or is hostile?
Oh no, there was never even a discussion of that. It was just hostile intent's good enough. Like it was the best way I can equate it to. So fighting ISIS was way different than like fighting the Taliban. ISIS was, they basically wore uniforms. They have a flag, they have front lines, they have,
like I said, territory. It's much more robust and much more ideology based than the Taliban. Like I said, to me, I describe them as thugs because it's an easy category to put them in.
Right, and so with ISIS, it was kind of like, I equate it to like if you were in World War II France, and you saw a Nazi, you can see he's got his SS symbol on. Okay, do I need permission to engage? No. It was complete and utter insanity. So I guess the umbrella of who was allowing us to be there was the Iraqi military. Okay. But that relationship had been built on trust that we're not going to be crazy. And so it was really bizarre. I know this whole thing's really bizarre. It was bizarre for me too. But we drove out into the Iraqi countryside, met up with this armored unit, and outside of Mosul, and it was just like everybody was like, "Oh, cool, yeah, like hey, the Americans are back, awesome," and they all called us Talbib or Talbaba or whatever, which is doctor or medic or whatever. And so we basically were there to act as combat medics and do humanitarian aid, bring in food and whatever else, because there's tons of civilians who are breaking free from Mosul, breaking free from all the different cities and towns. So the unit that we were attached with, it was the 36th Brigade of the 9th Armored Division. And so we're just basically in the Iraqi military. And so it's super weird. There's no other Americans around. There's no U.S. military presence. And that specific unit that we were with, they were armed with, I think they had like maybe a dozen up-armored American Humvees. They had an M1A1 Abrams, a T-72 tank, which is Russian, and a bunch of BMPs, Russian BMPs. And so what they were doing was they were just clearing all these different little villages and hamlets outside of Mosul. Originally, their intention was to go to Tal Afar, which would have been better suited for tank warfare, more flat, open ground. But we were, we helped them clear one of these villages, and then they were like, all right, cool, we're turning around and we're going to hit Mosul now. And they're going to take all this armor into Mosul, which is, extremely densely packed.
Yep.
And that's when things got absolutely out of control, absolutely insane. We ended up being like involved in like the front line of the invasion into West Mosul. So East Mosul had been cleared east of the Tigris River. West Mosul had yet to be cleared, and all the ISIS fighters who had survived the Battle of East Mosul
probably
had
pushed into West.
All pushed into West, which is the old city. That's where the Leaning Minaret, where Baghdadi had declared the caliphate. And the Iraqi army and the special operations guys were basically to the point where they could no longer push deeper into the city without taking like 150% casualties. It was just absurd the amount of casualties they were taking. And it was actually Eddie Gallagher's platoon was there at the same exact time, helping back up those guys.
And did you have any interaction with those American forces?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea that there were team guys there.
So you were only dealing with the Iraqi military.
Yeah.
Did you have anybody that you could have called for air support from? I mean,
the team leader, he's a former special forces guy. He had let the American generals know in Erbil, like, hey, we're out here, we're working with these guys. Here's intel, like here's what we're doing. We're not being cowboys, like we're out here, doing this stuff, and we'd feed intel to them. I got put in contact with a team guy, intel guy, who's doing ASO stuff. Up in Erbil, and so I would like occasionally just send him a text message like, "Hey man, like they used chemical weapons today," or different stuff like that. So
you're in around local burner phone. Do you have?
I actually use my personal. It's crazy. I use my personal iPhone, which I don't have anymore, of course. Yeah. But I had my personal iPhone, and I had cell service. So
did you switch out the SIM card
from the east side? Yeah. Switch out the SIM card. Yeah.
God damn, man.
So the east side of the river, though, it still had power and cell phone towers were up. So we're on the west side, which is just pure rubble as far as the eye can see. But yeah, we can have contact with those guys, and yeah, it's totally bizarre. In hindsight, it was nuts. But I was happy to be there. I was like, okay, like we're here, we're like helping these people out, and we ended up being, like I said, involved into opening up a second front on the western. In Western Mosul, and that was just a bloodbath. It was insane. So ISIS is entrenched in all these different positions, and then the Iraqi military, they just line up their tanks, World War II style, 50 of them, all firing at the same time, charging across open mined fields. These tanks are blowing up. ISIS is bringing out suicide cars, blowing up BMPs. Civilians are caught in the middle, and they're just running to us. And we're treating wounded people, and ISIS is just mortaring, and of course they have the entire place pre-dialed with mortars and everything.
Of course.
So yeah, it was nuts, dude. It was just like that was actually the morning of May 4th when that particular battle happened. Our interpreter was shot in the stomach. An Iraqi army guy who was basically assigned to work with us, kind of as like a driver, he got shot 6 times, rescuing the interpreter. The interpreter ended up dying a few days later, just from
internal injuries.
Yeah, internal injuries. But then so then we were in Mosul for basically the next 30 days straight, just house to house to house to house clearance, and you're dealing. So we're just with the Iraqi army, and the Iraqi army, and we're not even with the Iraqi infantry. We're with like an armored unit. So these guys are these tank drivers are getting out of their vehicles, running into a house to clear it.
And how are you assisting with that? I mean, you're just in there clearing with them?
No, we're acting as medics.
Okay.
So we're acting as medics. Like, there's way too much confusion. If you get up in there in the front line, you know how like difficult it is for us to even deconflict in a super dense urban population, in a super dense, like, who's shooting at what? Like, where's that coming from? Now imagine that, zero communication happening. And it was like, so it's like the Iraqi army's like, okay, you guys have, their deconfliction was, okay, you guys have these few blocks, this unit's going to take these few blocks, and there's a block in between that nobody goes into. And so, of course, there's tons of ISIS guys in there. And so then you end up with like a Polish ambush situation. And yeah, then you've got like tank drivers hopping out of their tanks, clearing buildings. And as chaotic and insane as it was, I honestly I built a lot of respect, actually. I developed a lot of respect for the Iraqi soldiers, because they were seeing casualties, like World War II level casualties all day, every day. And they still got up and went and did it. And we were constantly treating wounded. ISIS was just gunning down civilians who were trying to, break free from ISIS territories.
What kind of medical background do you have other than the training?
Zero.
So you were just out there.
I was the
OJT, on the job training.
TCCC.
Yeah.
That was it. What I had from the teams. That's what I had. But that basically qualified me as a medic out there, which is the craziest thing, because nobody had medical training. There was a couple guys who had some good medical training. The Iraqis had one guy who was an actual doctor, and he was he was legit, but they didn't bring him up on the front line at all. So he was always
probably a good call.
Excellent call. So they kept him like a mile behind, or like a kilometer behind. So yeah, we would just ferry all day, every day, just wounded, and treat them.
Just mangled people from war.
Mm-hmm. And we would, of course, get caught up in the fighting as well, because ISIS is everywhere. So we're getting into gnarly gunfights. I mean, a couple of guys had like bullets go through their clothes, and I got into. Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. The ISIS is, they're heavily armed, point blank range, firing RPGs at us, and so that basically happened for about 30 days straight until I ended up getting hit, which was June 2nd, 2017. So at this point now I'm out of the military. It was actually, so it's funny. My first battle over there, the first like contact I got into, was like an assault into one of these outlying towns before Mosul. And when the battle kicked off, it was actually the day before my last day in the military. So it was kind of funny. I was like, I hope I don't get wounded today, or else I'm going to be in huge trouble for being over here, doing whatever. Like, I have no idea what's going on. So we assault this ISIS held little village. ISIS is pulling out suicide bombers, and we crossed this minefield, twice. The Humvee I was taking cover next to, I walked away from it, turned around, it blew up. And it would have totally, obviously would have killed me had I still been standing there. Then we ended up going in and like clearing some tunnels, which had ISIS guys and landmines in them. And it was just complete and utter insanity. And then we buried the ISIS guys alive, which was great.
What you are describing is not going to contextually define what most people think of when they think of humanitarian work.
I agree. So one of the things I do need to clarify is this was like the 1% of the time when things went absolutely haywire. Most of the time, we're acting as just basically frontline combat medics who are helping treat wounded civilians. But instead of being a mile behind the lines, we're up there on the front, 10 feet behind the line, dealing with whoever we need to, helping whoever we need to help. And then when there's no fighting going on, cool, just keep your rifle slung on your back, and you're giving out food and, saying hi to civilians that are coming on by. So yeah, it was humanitarian in the sense that we were doing, like, basically acting as medics. That's where the humanitarian sort of backup came. But
what would they have used for medics if you guys weren't there?
Nobody.
They just let people die?
They had one guy who would drive an ambulance. His name was Faiz. He's super cool. Super cool Iraqi dude. He always had this gnarly handlebar mustache he was always rocking.
Powerful handlebar stash.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's so funny. He didn't speak a lick of English. But it was always like my job to follow him around. So he just like, blah, 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 like yelling at me in Arabic, and I had no idea what's going on. But I'm like, all right, cool. He talk about OJT. That guy had on the job training. He was never gone to any kind of medical school, but he had just like kind of learned, and he was like their one ambulance driver, their one quote unquote medic. And that was it. And then they would just, it was, pick up a wounded guy, throw him in the back of a vehicle, drive him back to the one, the legit medic, the doctor.
Repeat ad nauseum.
Yeah, same for civilians and everything. So it was actually very good that we were there. So we did that for about 30 days, and then on June 2nd, 2017, we were at the very, very front line of the advance into the old city, which is even more densely populated and densely packed buildings. This like the 1,000-year-old buildings. That's where that's actually where the particular mosque was, the Leaning Mosque, where the Baghdadi had declared the caliphate. And I actually saw it the day before I got hit. I saw it. I was like, that's where
crazy
that's
history and culture there.
Yeah. That was before they demolished it. So I'm actually glad I got to kind of see it on the distance. I was like, oh yeah, that's it over there, a couple blocks away. But we ended up, we woke up one morning and there were, a massacre had happened the day before. So ISIS was obviously shooting people all the time anyway, but they had shot and massacred, I think, like over 200 people. And we've been treating these wounded people all the day prior. So all these wounded people were coming in, kids, little girls, old people, all these people are coming in wounded, and we didn't really know why. We didn't really understand what had happened. And of course, everybody's like, oh, ISIS was shooting. And, we figured like maybe a car bomb went off or something. We weren't really sure. And all these people were dying. And then the next day we got up and we saw this massacre, and there was just like 160 bodies in the streets. We're talking little babies with their heads bashed in because their parents were shot while carrying them, an old man in a wheelchair, pregnant women, little girls. The most like horrific stuff I never thought I would see in my life. You see stuff from the concentration camps, or you see photos and video footage of like the Khmer Rouge and the killing fields, and you think, I'll never see something like that in my life. And I just woke up one day and it was there, and it was like you've got to be kidding me. This is very real. And the problem was the massacre had happened kind of like in ISIS territory, just in front of the front line, and there was a pile of bodies that was probably 20 or 30 bodies that had all just kind of naturally fallen on top of each other as they'd been machine gunned down while running away from ISIS. And there was people still alive in the bodies. And one of them was a little girl, and she was hiding under her, we assume it was her mother's hijab. And there were several kids that were also alive in the bodies, and a couple of men. And so we saw them, and we knew, okay, we have to go in and we have to go do something. The Iraqi military, they were not keen on doing so, and rightfully so, because right where the massacre had happened in this open. It was like what had been a 6-lane highway, but it was now just flat, rubbled, cratered from just 1,000 explosions, and there's nothing is recognizable. But it's just a nice flat open area. And then ISIS was occupying this like 4 or 5 story, what used to be a hospital, and they were keeping like 200 people in there reportedly as human shields, basically. So that was their headquarters, and that's where the massacre had clearly come from. Machine gunners up in that position, but then they also had guys up on the flank as well in all these other tall buildings. And the massacre was right in the middle. So just this perfect L ambush killing field. Yep. And so we saw the kids alive, and we were like, well, we have to do something. So we started kind of talking amongst ourselves. We're like, hey, like the Iraqi army's not going to do something. We should do something. And we eventually, throughout the course of the day, so there had been 4 children alive that we had seen.
So you're just watching this from a distance.
We're watching
identifying kids that are alive.
Oh yeah, we're watching this from from here to the little building down there. But we're looking at not even 100 yards away, but we're in the buildings, in the rubble, kind of like hidden from ISIS.
Yep.
Looking directly at this. And throughout the day, as the Iraqi army kept on stalling, 3 of the 4 kids died from heat exhaustion. They just stopped moving at some point and just laid down and just didn't ever get back up. And so there was 1 girl and 2 wounded men in this pile of bodies. And so finally, at the end, the Iraqi military was like, okay, we'll give you guys a tank. We'll give you 1 tank. And the team leader of the guys I was with, he had actually called the U.S. military. He called the general and he said, hey, there's a massacre just happened here. I recommend you put a drone overhead. So they did. They put a drone overhead and saw what had happened. And they said, the team leader reported hey, we've got kids still alive. Can you guys give us a smoke screen or something? Mm-hmm. And the American military actually agreed to give us a smoke screen. So they fired from using artillery. They fired white phosphorus into the city and started laying down this smoke screen. And we made the decision, like, all right, let's we gotta go do this. It's now or never. And the Iraqi military, they had their tank right there ready to go. And we were like, all right, cool, let's go do this. So the Iraqi tank, which was an M1 Abrams, drove out into the middle of this killing field. And immediately we started taking fire, machine gun mortar fire. But ISIS couldn't see us because of the smoke screen. And so they're firing, and they weren't using tracers, obviously, because they're not stupid. But they were firing into this. And so we got out behind the tank, and we're just amongst all the bodies. And, at that point, I'd been in combat before in Afghanistan, and, I'd been in a couple of hairy situations. But this was totally different. You're in a killing field. The enemy has the high ground, and they have you flanked, and there's nothing between you and them. And you can't see them. There's nothing you can do. There's like 5 of you. There's the reports at the time. There's at least 100 of them minimum. That's being very conservative. And so I remember I took as the tank was kind of shifting and trying to get into like a better position to make a shot kind of down the road up to where the little girl was at. I took a knee in a ditch, and I almost, I don't know, I think I almost started going into shock from terror, because we're just watching these rounds just hit all around you, and there's just dead people everywhere. So you can't. There's no way to sort of. There's no cover. There's no cover. And I would never. This is the analogy I use. I would never claim to ever say that I've been through anything like the invasion of Normandy. I wouldn't. Visually, though, that's exactly the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan is exactly what it looked like. The smoke, the machine gun nests, and bodies everywhere. That's exactly what it looked like, and the explosions and stuff coming in. Well, eventually, so I started going into like terror shock or something, and I had to play this mental game in my head, where it was like, okay, well, 2 things went through my head. One was, that little girl is going to die if we don't get her, and that's it. Like, there is no, you can talk all day. You can say that you love humanity. You can say that you're a warrior. You can say whatever you want to. When the chips are down, it's like, no, dude, she's going to die if you don't do something. So I was like, all right, that was one way I kind of got over it. But then the other one was too, and it sounds kind of corny, but it was like, I'm a SEAL, like I'm a team guy. And I lit that line from the, the SEAL Creed, where it talks about the reputation of the SEAL teams, demands that I always, continue forward no matter what, no matter what's going on. And the reputation of my fallen teammates, that literally went through my head, and I thought about a couple of buddies that had passed away in combat and in training, and I was just like, I have to go forward. There is no option to go forward. Like, I will. Like, this was like the ultimate like earn your trident today kind of situation, and so those 2 things were the only reason I was able to keep going, and because my vision started going in. I started seeing stars. My arms and legs stopped working. Just all the blood was just rushing to the middle of my body. Went through that mental exercise. Rounds are still coming in, and it was like, all right, cool, let's go, and popped back up. And by this point, the tank was ready to roll, and so we just sprinted straight into ISIS territory, not even 50 yards away from all these different mounted, embedded machine gun positions. And again, they have us on the different angles, and they pick up their fire. Rounds are just pinging off of the tank. Mortars are landing behind us, and we get up close to where the girl is at, and we start screaming at her like to come to us. She's out of it. The M1's main gun started firing. They fired the actual cannon.
Turret gun, yeah.
Yeah, and we weren't using any ear pro. I just had my hat on backwards and was carrying my AK. And
I'm sure it was a ballistic ball cap.
Yeah, it was a ballistic ball cap. Yeah, it was Patagonia. It was like
Patagucci.
Yeah, it was Patagucci. Yeah,
7.62 by 39. You're fine.
Exactly. It was totally good. That's what's good for the planet. But yeah, the thing was when the main gun fired its tank, like it almost knocks you over because it's so loud.
Well, especially if you're in front of it.
Yeah, but no, we were behind it though. Thank
okay.
God. No, we're right behind it. So that exhaust, they have like a jet engine in there or something like. So the exhaust is like burning the hair off of our arms and faces and stuff. But the little girl didn't even blink. So the gun goes, she just is in shock. She's not blinking. I can imagine. And she's been out there for almost 2 days at this point, almost 48 hours at this point. And so basically the team leader, what he did was he ran out and grabbed the girl, myself and another guy. We popped out and just laid covering fire as best we could into ISIS positions. He brought the little girl back, and then we had to go out and get the 2 men. And at this point, the tank started firing its machine gun that it had up there. And we get the 2 men back behind the tank. And, you know, originally, the original plan was actually to bring a Humvee behind the tank so we could just load everybody into the Humvee. But they refused. The Humvee crew refused to go. The Iraqi, they didn't want to play that game that day. And so we're sitting there with all these people. Right, you know, so the team leader, he grabs a little girl, and myself and another guy, we throw this severely wounded guy onto like this tabletop that we just found in the middle of the street randomly. I think somebody else had been carrying somebody else when the massacre had happened. And so we kind of throw him on this tabletop, and we start dragging him, because then the tank just starts backing up. We have no communication with the tank. I don't know who gave them the signal to get out of there, but they were like, hey, we're done, we're going back. So they just start backing up basically right on top of us. So we're dragging this guy on this stretcher thing, and he falls off, and so I go to get him from. I can't pick him up at this point. It's just dead weight. This tank is literally from me to you at this point, and his feet are almost underneath the tread kind of thing. Yeah, and there's rubble and bodies everywhere, and you can't. There's nothing you can do. So I grabbed him, I rolled him out of the way, and just so the tank wouldn't run him over, and he like looked back up at me. And I was just like, it was one of those situations. I was like, I can't get you. There is no, like, you need Superman, man. Right now, there's nothing I can do for you. And like, that sucked. I'd made a bunch of decisions in my life to, save people's life. I'd never made a decision like, hey dude, you're going to die. And I had to make that call right now. It was the right call. But so I'm kind of like looking at him. I'm kind of in shock from like just having to make that decision. I step back behind the tank, and the burst of machine gun fire comes in and takes my leg out from underneath me. Luckily, it was a small bullet. It was just a 5.56. Went through my calf, in and out. Didn't hit the bone. Didn't hit the arteries. But I fell down behind the tank. It almost crushes me. The guys start screaming at me because I wasn't even looking at the tank. It would have run me over 100%. All my focus was just on my leg, and luckily it didn't snap the bone. But at the time, I didn't know if it had or not.
Yeah.
And so I was just like kind of staring at it, and I'm just watching blood, starting to gush from both the entry and exit wounds. And then they start like screaming at me. So I turn around, and I'm like, oh, there's a tank about to run me over. So I just was like, all right, stand up, hopefully my leg doesn't snap, at the shin. And luckily it didn't. So then I started throwing a tourniquet on, just tripping over the bodies as I was doing it. It was super, super crazy situation. And then we got back near Iraqi army lines, and then we needed a Humvee to cross this no man's land. If you go into this no man's land, you cross this highway, like, you're going to get shot. Like, ISIS can see you. The smoke is dissipating at this point. And I was already wounded, and we were screaming for the Iraqis to send us a Humvee, but they wouldn't do it. And we're just out there stranded. And so I just was like, I'm already wounded. I'm pretty much expendable at this point. If I go down, I go down. So I volunteered to run across the street and scream at them and like get someone to get a Humvee or drive it out there myself if I had to. So I run across the street. ISIS opens fire. Bullets are, slamming at my feet and all that jazz. And by the way, all this is on video. The whole thing was caught on video, which is just insane. And I get back across the street. I pass the word, hey, they need a Humvee. I see someone hop in a Humvee and, go out there and help them. So I'm like, all right, cool. My mission's done. But then, I ended up getting transported to a Kurdish hospital in Erbil. Spent the night in an ward with a bunch of other wounded Kurdish guys, and I was the only white dude in there. And Kurdish intelligence thought I was ISIS, so they actually came in and like they interrogated me. It was a very simple conversation though. I was like, while I was in bed, it was just a simple conversation. But I was white guy with a beard. I look like a Chechen fighter.
No fingernail pliers required.
No fingernail pliers. I was like, no. And so I started explaining. I was like, no, here's what I am and here's what I'm doing. And they had a lot of the same questions as you. And they're like, wait, what? What are you doing here? What? Why? How? And I just explained to him. But it was so that guy left, and man, that night, spending that night in that hospital with all these wounded guys, man, it was like a haunted house, man. Like the screaming, and the power went out multiple times, and guys were wounded way worse than I. Guys have been like shot in the hip, or shot in, in horrible places and severely wounded, and just hearing like the screaming and the crying in the darkness all night. That was a that was an interesting night. And then the next day they released me, and I kind of like went and hung out at the safe house that we had there in Erbil, and 2 weeks later flew home back to Wisconsin. So yeah, it was really but that's when also too, that's when during all of this, it was like, okay, I need to be doing more of this, but in a better way, in a smarter way. What I saw was like, hey, people are caught in the crossfire of these wars, and guys like us are uniquely situated to do something about that. And that doesn't always look like, okay, charging the machine gun nest and grabbing the girl. That's not what it always is. But we have the ability to operate and do what we need to do in far off places, and survive in these places to save lives. And so I started an organization called Stronghold Rescue and Relief, and that's what we do. We send in former special ops guys to protect and assist families in these different conflict zones. So right now we have permanent operations in Burma. So I ended up getting to go to Burma. So we have full-time operations in Burma, Venezuela, and Colombia. And the way I run things, the way we do things, is we train up teams of locals to be able to stand on their own. So we have a rescue team in Burma that's all ethnic guys from Burma that are trained up in how to evacuate the civilians, deliver food, all that stuff. So I've been doing this for the last few years, months and months and months, just living in the jungle, eating rice, and just living in huts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then same thing down on the Colombia-Venezuela border. We have like a children's refuge, which is run by ex-Venezuelan soldiers who defected from Maduro. And so we're able to give them a job, and then we're also able to smuggle medical supplies and food and emergency aid and stuff into Venezuela, into any place into Venezuela. And we're even, it's weird, like we have to smuggle medicine into hospitals. But we have guys that do all that. So I spent the last few years building up this capability, and it's been, I designed it specifically because I was like, that's the right way to do things, is to enable the locals to do things. I call it charity with dignity.
I was going to say, it sounds almost like a FID/advise and assist capacity.
Yeah, it's very much, I'm like a civilian Green Beret, basically.
Yeah.
But like we're focusing on humanitarian stuff, and what's interesting about it is I built it to where they can stand on their own. The entire concept of it is to build up teams of locals so they can, if God forbid something happens to me again, like they can still continue to do this. And with this whole COVID thing, I never imagined like there would be some worldwide pandemic that shut everything down. But we are still operating at 100% capacity, and there's different organizations that operate in these areas in similar capacities, but they're all shut down. Well, we have our children's refuge on the Colombia-Venezuela border. Every single organization that's in our area, and I'm pretty sure it's every single one, but because we haven't found a single one that's still open, they've all closed their doors. And so now you have thousands of people that aren't getting food, people starving to death on the Colombia-Venezuela border, let alone inside Venezuela, people in Burma not getting food. And the wars continue. The gang violence still continues. All that stuff still continues. And the beauty of it is we're still there. And because our teams are local, so they are, they're staying where they're supposed to be. And it doesn't rely on me to go in and do everything.
You have any idea what happened to that girl?
Yeah, she was repatriated with a family, like a distant family member. So what's interesting too about her is we're pretty sure she was the daughter of an ISIS guy.
Really?
Yeah. So they were Sunni, and the family didn't want anyone to know who they were when the girl was repatriated with them. They didn't want anybody to know who they were because they were afraid of revenge.
Yeah.
Because they were associated with ISIS. And ironically, too, we found out later, because millions and millions of people have seen this footage of this rescue mission and all this stuff, and people identified the guy that didn't make it, the guy that had pulled out of the way of the tank tread. Multiple people have identified him as saying, "Oh, he was actually an ISIS sympathizer. He worked with ISIS. Like he was ISIS."
Interesting.
But then he was trying to get out of there too. And got
Karma's a bitch.
Oh, I know. So I was like, oh, that's actually really great. That turned out really well. Now I don't feel bad anymore.
Should have given him the bird. Like,
yeah. Exactly.
So how do you decide where you're going to allocate your resources, since you are now, you're doing this, as you described it, smarter in a way that you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that there are more conflict zones in the world than there are your ability to help them.
For sure.
So how do you pick and choose?
So the two things. One is A, where there's an opportunity, because a lot of times you don't have an opportunity to get in somewhere. But then B is, who am I helping? And what I mean by that is, there are some people, like there's different wars that go on, and it's like both sides are bad, and I'm not getting in the middle of that. And I'm sorry that there are people caught in that, but it's like, dude, you guys are eating each other alive, and there's no way for me to really get in there and help. So, for example, like Burma, I was invited to come in and, through mutual friends or whatever, somebody asked for someone like me to come in and help, basically show them how to protect themselves. Mm. So I went in, and this tribe I was working with, they are just like the most kind, gracious, wonderful human beings ever. And it's really interesting. So they're all like, they live in the jungle in the middle of nowhere, but they're all like Baptist, which I grew up Baptist, which is super weird. Cause like
missionaries.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. Like I ended up like, the whole thing came back, circled around, but yeah. I chose them, and I was like, okay, I'm going to work with you guys. I'm going to continue working with you because you're not lying. You're not stealing. You're not causing this to become worse. And because that's what happens in a lot of times, right? You've worked obviously tons of partner nations and partner forces, and you're like, dude, you guys are the problem. You guys don't know what you're doing. You guys are stealing. You guys are terrible humans.
And we're empowering you.
And we're empowering you, exactly. So I have actually gone into certain places, and people have asked me to come in there and help, and I've done a little bit of preliminary, being nice, kind of checking it out, and then kind of leaving and be like, no, I'm not going to get involved in that because they're not going to. I know what's going to happen. They're not going to. The program's going to get messed up. These guys are not responsible enough to handle it, and so I'm very picky and choosy with that. And then also down in the Colombia-Venezuela border area, just got to make sure you're working with the right people. So I went down there, just made connections, asked around, without, we can talk offline more about it, but getting in contact with, ex-Venezuelan soldiers and all that stuff. And then you'd kind of vet them and figure it out and just slowly but surely build up what you're doing with them.
Are you dealing with the governments directly?
No, but, actually kind of, yes. In Burma, the government is the problem, right? So the central Burmese government, they're the ones that are doing the genocide and the rape and the murder and all that stuff. So in a way, yes, we are directly involved with confronting them. But in like Colombia, we're registered. It's a different situation there, right? So it's super high risk because there's been several bombings just this year, right near our children's refuge. Obviously there's gangs, there's all kinds of violence. Actually, gangs had gone through there and had shut down a bunch of other organizations, but they let ours stay open because we're run by Venezuelan people and not run by a bunch of gringos running around down there.
Yeah.
And so in that context of Colombia, yes, the Colombian government knows that we're there. We're registered with them, but we're also not doing anything like what we're doing in Burma. The mission says it's completely different. It's protecting and taking care of like kids in this in that context of being in this sort of gang controlled area, and providing food, medicine, clean water, things like that. So super stereotypical kind of humanitarian stuff, but it's in a super high risk environment. And then obviously in Venezuela, like we've had guys smuggling in medicine almost get executed. Venezuelan guys taking the Venezuelan government taking their stuff and basically saying like, if you do this again, we're going to kill you, kind of thing.
Are your guys gunned up?
In Burma, yes. In Venezuela, no. And in Colombia, no. They're working in like a high risk environment, but they're not running tactical missions or anything like that.
Probably for more of self-defense purposes.
But there's those weapons and things like that are super highly controlled in like in Colombia, but there's and same thing in like Venezuela. So like if it's worse, you're worse off to get caught with a gun than to like not even have one. Your chances of like talking your way out of something are way higher than like, oh, you got a pistol on you, cool. Guess what? Roger
You're
that.
not talking your way out of that.
Yeah, you're going to the gulag. And I know guys that are like in the gulag kind of thing. They're in really, really bad situations. Not guys working directly for me.
Yeah.
Or anything, but.
Have you been able to pull guys out of that from the SEAL community to help you directly?
I've got multiple guys that are still in that are wanting to come and help out. The issue is they need to be out first, of course, but then the
hypocrite.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I want to do what you're doing. I'm like,
first you have to be on terminal leave.
Yeah, exactly. Fill out this chit. Get a request from request permission from your command.
Florida.
Exactly. So no, I haven't had anybody directly from the teams come out just yet, but I've got multiple guys that are kind of lined up to come and volunteer. So also it's volunteer. Like I can't pay anybody at this point. We don't bring in enough to do that. My goal is to get it to the point where it's like I can hire 3 to 4 full-time guys that go and do this stuff and spread the workload. But yeah, we're not at that point just yet. So I've had a few guys come in and volunteer with me that have like Ranger backgrounds or like Marine backgrounds and stuff like that. But I'm also very extremely picky about bringing guys in, though, as well. So have you ever heard of the term voluntourist?
Voluntourist?
Yeah.
I cannot say that I have.
So, man, it's this weird phenomena where people are like, hey, man, I want to go on an adventure vacation. So I'm going to go volunteer with some organization and go have the adventure of a lifetime. Oh, and because I'm doing volunteer work, I'm going to get a bunch of people to give me a bunch of money and basically pay for my vacation, pay for my adventure vacation. And it's voluntourism. So people who show up to take photos of themselves for Instagram, dude, it's insane. Or take videos of themselves, and they're like, and it's even worse, like in kind of my area of like what I do, because it's like I'll have somebody that's like, oh yeah, I was in the military for a couple of years, and I see them work with other organizations, and I'm like, dude, like that's not cool, because they're just, doing whatever they can. Yeah, here I am in Iraq, you know, and the problem is, so they spend thousands and thousands of dollars. These individuals will spend thousands and thousands of dollars to go on this adventure vacation, and they don't do anything to help the people. And so I'm extremely wary of that, of like who I bring in and who I sort of introduce into the club kind of thing. Not that it's a club,
I don't blame you for that at all.
Yeah, and there's no selection course. It's just,
I could see it being an avenue for people like yourself who wanted to continue to have an impact, but I can also see a flavor and a draw to an individual that wants to be able to go into areas like that and act like a cowboy absent oversight.
Absolutely. I 100% completely agree. And I've seen that, and I continue to see it. And nothing makes me more angry, because then I'm afraid that I'm going to get kind of lumped into that group. And it's like, no, I'm not associated with those guys. I'm not associated with that kind of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's what I meant by voluntourism. This is a chance for me to go and just go do whatever I want. But the beauty of it, though, too, is because A, you have to volunteer, but B, it's like, hey, if you're not coming out for at least a month, and if you're not willing to go rot in the jungle for a month, don't show up.
Yeah, go kick rocks.
Exactly. So that's like a great deterrent too. Well, it's
a good litmus test. But I was thinking like 72 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what it is. Everybody wants to take leave from work or whatever. Everybody wants to take 10 days off of work and go have an adventure somewhere. And you're like, no, that's not what this is. This is, you're going to sit there, you're going to eat rice, you might step on a landmine, you might not. You're going to be in the middle of nowhere, there's no backup, nobody's coming to help you, and you're not there to go have fun, and you're not even there to like necessarily take part in the fun parts, what we would consider the fun parts. You're not there to do that. You're there to enable these other guys to do it. You're there to train and to protect the people and do, medical training or whatever, basic self-defense training, stuff like that. That's what you're there for. Oh, and by the way, it's going to suck the entire time, because you're just going to rot in the jungle. Yeah. And so it's really great, because it's just a lot of.
That's going to weed out 99.9% of the people right there.
Right. So you have to like really believe in it. But it's surprisingly, it's been extremely effective. I've just observed these different organizations, like the organization I worked with in Iraq, and different organizations who have access to like millions of dollars, and the waste,
or probably / corruption,
dude. The levels of corruption. We could talk for 4 hours just about the corruption that happens in these different organizations, and it is rampant and it's insane. So basically, most of the people that I've seen who run nonprofit, like humanitarian organizations, especially kind of in this realm, I guess I would call it like high risk humanitarian work, I guess. I don't know. 99% of the guys I've come across, they're basically used car salesmen who can tell a story and raise a bunch of money. So if you run a business, right, you have to have a superior product that people want to continue giving you money for, right? So you're like, okay, I expect my Killcliff drink here to taste a certain way. I expect it to, look a certain way. I expect it to be delivered on time, and I'm going to pay X amount for that particular service.
Yep.
In the nonprofit world, there is no return on the service. There's only photos and videos and somebody getting up and saying, here's what we're doing. The best evidence you get is a video or a photo of how your money's being used and whatnot. And so what happens is you have these guys that are master storytellers and very, very culty, very, very, very cult-like. And a lot of them are very much like based on like religion. We're out here loving people and serving God and blah, 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 blah. And here I am in Iraq or wherever, and they're able to raise a bunch of money from people who don't understand, no, like how many people have you helped?
Yeah.
And in what way have you helped them?
Some quantifiable metrics.
We've helped, we helped 10,000 people today. Like, no. You gave out 10,000 water bottles today, which is like a tiny, tiny fraction of the budget that you're working with.
Yeah.
So why are you spending all this other money on, flying your family around the world? Why are you spending this money on all this other stuff? And it's insane. I was working with one organization. They actually hired me to work for them for about a year. And so while I was working with them, they were paying me very well. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll take the nice paycheck. It was a fair paycheck. I was like, yeah, that's good. I feel like someone with my background, like I feel like this is a worthy paycheck.
Yep.
But they were only giving me to work with the people I was working with, to help the people. They were giving me a third of what they were personally paying me to actually give to the people who need it. And I was like, okay, I'm not cool with that. But I was like, I'm going to be getting more, right, to help the people. Oh, yeah, don't worry. Oh, yeah, don't worry. A year later, not an extra dime had come in. And it literally got to the point where I was like, hey, like, what if I get cheaper flights, can I,
use that savings somewhere
else?
That?
Nope, you don't get to do that. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what do you mean? And like, well, that's just not how the funding and the routing works and stuff like that. And I was like, dude, you have got to be kidding me. And so then there was also super absurd levels of corruption going on at the high levels of that organization as well. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I need to. And so I just left, and I was like, no, I don't care. Screw you, screw your money. Like, it's.
I can imagine that's
nuts.
Almost impossible though for the layperson to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Which sucks.
Which it does.
Because it'll turn people off, and they'll say, "Fuck everybody."
Exactly. Well, and that's how I feel in many ways personally as well. So one of the things that I do with like my organization to make things different is I have a limit on how much you can give per month, which is $1 a day, so $30 a month. That's the maximum you can give, that you can pledge per month to my organization. Mm-hmm. I also actively encourage people to give to other organizations that they believe in. If you have $100 in your budget every month that you just want to give to charity, hey, that's great. Why don't you spend, why don't you donate $15 a month to Stronghold, 50 cents a day? Yep. And then why don't you also, if you're into the environment, you're passionate about that, donate to a wildlife conservation or a school with kids with special needs, whatever. Donate to multiple different things. So that's one of the ways that I'd kind of. I'm not out there like, hey, everybody give money and all that stuff. It's like, if you want to give, I'll tell you what we do, but don't give more than like $30 a month, because what happens is, and I observed this growing up as well, right? Being in a religious mm-hmm. setting where that's a nonprofit setting, of course, is every time it's, toward the end of the month they need more money, what do? The pastor or whoever gets up and he preaches this sermon about hellfire and damnation, and you need to give to save lives and blah 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 blah, and it's this big political speech, and of course people are just emotionally just start giving and they start pledging all this money, and I don't want people to do that with my organization. So I'll tell you who I am, what I'm about, what we do, what the organization does. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to blow it out of proportion. Here's what we do. If you'd like to be a part of it, why don't you give 50 cents a day? That's one meal a month. Yep. And if not, that's totally cool too. And also too, if things get bad, so we've had people who like, signed up. They're like, oh, I want to give $100 a month. Like right when I originally started it, before I put the cap on it. People are like, oh, they hear the story, they hear me on a podcast or hear me whatever, and like, oh, I want to give $100 a month. That's a lot. That's a lot of money to be coming out of your paycheck every month. And you're gonna miss that. You're gonna hurt that, and that's gonna hurt you. And if something bad happens in life or whatever, you're gonna want that $100 back. And so now that $100 a month, we don't get that. So now we get nothing. Now you feel bad because you cancel, and it's just
a poor transaction on both sides.
It's a really poor transaction. So I'm like, if you want to give, why don't you give $15 a month? And it's actually been really interesting, just on the funding side with this whole COVID thing. And the the economic downturn that we're in right now, our funding has actually gone up.
People can tolerate the $15, the $100 though.
They can't tolerate.
They
right.
cannot. Yeah,
exactly. And we've actually had people like email us like, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I lost my job. I can't afford to give the $30 a month that I pledged. Are you guys okay with that?" Absolutely, 100%. Because we have hundreds of people who each give a little bit.
Yep.
And therefore, when things get bad, it's okay. It's okay. You don't feel bad. And we're also not losing a big chunk of money that we were expecting to be coming in. We have to budget stuff out ahead of time.
I think that's a smart strategy. I obviously know nothing about it, but just thinking about it, a larger pool of people donating a smaller amount of money will allow you to be able to tolerate the ebb and flow or the natural sine wave of people's personal economic situations or global economic situations for sure. I think it's smart.
Yeah, well, it's just like investing in the stock market, right? You want to diversify what you have, or mutual funds, whatever. Diversify into a bunch of things.
Ignore it completely.
Or ignore it completely. Yeah, that's always an option. But yeah, and it was because I just saw that was what was happening in a lot of these organizations too. Was the traditional model is what'll happen is people from an organization will aggressively sort of pursue very wealthy people and try and get that $1 million donation or trying to get that $100,000 donation. And what I saw was, that's not good for the relationships that you're building with people. Because like I have friends who are extremely wealthy, and I would never want them to think for 2 seconds that I'm friends with them because they have access to a lot of money and I want them to support my organization. I would never want them to think that. So it's like, if you want to give, dude, great. If not, that's totally fine too. Like I don't care. But then what also happens is you'll get somebody who wants to donate a bunch of money. You'll randomly get that person who's like, oh, I want to give $25,000 or I want to give $100,000. Well, they always want something in return. Yes. And so you end up babysitting them. So you're losing a bunch of time because you constantly have to check in with them and you constantly have to, appease them. And then they ultimately, and I've even seen this a little bit with mine, is people will want to go and do what you're doing, who are completely unqualified. Like, oh, I gave $25,000. I want to go on a trip with you. No, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, that's not the game you're playing.
That's not what we're doing. And you want to know what? You're going to spend at least $5,000 on your round trip international first class ticket and the hotels and food and everything. You're going to spend $5,000 easy to do a 2-week trip, and that's going to cause me all kinds of problems. I'm going to lose, tons of time, tons of productivity.
Maybe babysitting.
Exactly. And so I also am able to avoid that. By following this model, and it's been really good, man. It's been amazing seeing people continue to give, and then it's actually gone up, which I was not expecting.
Well, since we're talking about it right now in the organization, what's the best way for people to find you and support you?
StrongholdRescue.org.
Normal spelling?
Yep, StrongholdRescue.org. Or you can go check me out at Ephraim Mattos on Instagram at Ephraim Mattos, and I've got a link right there in my bio.
Silent
check
I.
It out.
There's a silent I in there.
There's a silent I. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, people can just go check us out online. And
okay, that's the beauty of the internet.
Oh, it's
much
wonderful,
like you
man.
discovering the SEAL community. It's unlimited access, and right now, a lot of time for people to surf around and find things. I've been thinking this whole time as you're talking about this, slightly non sequitur to your organization, but it seems like you grew up, in a culture that I would describe on the fringe, and I don't say that pejoratively. It's on the fringe, and then you entered another culture that I would also describe as on the fringe. It seems like you came up in a world that was very regimented. And what was the description that you guys had? It was law for...
legalism.
Legalism, right?
Yeah,
you came from
very legalist,
legalism perspective to, let's just call it the Wild West and the SEAL teams.
Right.
Where'd you personally net out after both of those experiences?
Where did I personally what?
Where'd you net out after those?
I think, wow, that's actually a great question. That's a great way to phrase it. I'd say I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form now. I believe there's a God. I believe that there are certain laws that govern nature. I think on my personal philosophical level, I'm a firm believer in like deism and natural law, and like that mixed with like Greek reason is a good way to live your life. Because ultimately none of us know for sure if whatever religion we believe in is the actual thing. You're not going to know until you're actually dead,
Yeah.
So I think, natural law, Greek reason mixed together, basically form the basis for what I would define, I guess, as morality and how I try to live my life. And of course I'm human, so I fail all the time, but yeah, also like when I was in the teams, like I was never a big drinker. Like that was just something I never really got into because it just never really interested me. So I don't think, I never like fully lost my mind on the one end, getting alcohol related incidents or anything like that.
Sounds like you got exposure to it at the very least.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I dabbled and, went out and had my fair share of crazy nights, Oh, for sure. But then it was like, okay, that was fun, but like, I don't need that, for my life.
Sounds like you landed in the middle.
I feel like I landed in the middle. I try to take the best from both worlds, and like life's already crazy enough, and we live in a crazy time, and I just try to find the middle somewhere, but using reason, looking at what's natural, look at natural law, and if you believe in God, which I do. It's like the laws of God are the laws of nature, and the laws of nature are the laws of God. So we try to look at people try to look at religion and say, well, the textbook clearly says such a document says X, Y, and Z, but it's like you don't know that it actually says X, Y, and Z because that was written 2,000 years ago. You don't know the context. You don't read you don't know the initial language.
Passed down through generations.
And it's passed down through. So it's like, dude, you don't really know that. So look at natural law. What's natural, and use reason. If you believe in God, it's like, okay, cool. God gave you the ability to reason. That's what makes us different than the animals. So use that to do the right thing. And also kind of tying that back into what we were talking about before with nonprofit organizations. Again, I'd mentioned earlier, some of them, are very like religious based. And because of that basis in religion, they can get away with, ironically, doing immoral things. And by immoral, I mean like wastes of money and ineffective programs because, well, I'm doing the will of God, therefore I can do no wrong.
G550.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, not quite that bad, but almost.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some. Oh, there's some guy listening to this. He's like, oh, awkward.
Son of a bitch.
They know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like they use that as an excuse to say like, oh, I'm doing the right thing because I'm following the will of God, and so then now you no longer have to use reason. You no longer have to use logic.
It's a convenient excuse for a lot of behaviors.
Yeah.
Did throughout the course of your life and the journey that you went on from leaving the environment that you grew up into, all of the things that you've talked about over the last few hours, has it had an impact on your faith? Did it strengthen it, or did it chip away at it?
My faith is, I would guess, in a way that's I refer to as like deism. So deism basically says that like God created the world. There's set up natural law. Everything is governed through the laws of physics, and that's that is law. And other than that, like God doesn't really get his hands into anything. So my faith is that there is a God, a creator. I don't think it's a dude sitting up in the clouds. I think it's more, it sounds nerdy, but it's more akin to like the Force. It's within all things. It's anywhere and everywhere. And so my faith is that that there is a God, there is a creator, there is a rhyme and a reason to all this. But God, he, whatever you want to refer to it as, like, is not going to come down and be like, oh, hey, you're going into battle and you just prayed, so I'm going to go ahead and move bullets out of the way so you can go and, and do what you need to do. So, I've been in, several different conflicts and also in Burma. I have never once prayed before going into combat because I'm like, it's not God's fault that I'm here. This is us humans having our own issues.
Yeah, we're working our shit out here.
We're working it out.
Yeah.
And he's not going to be like, oh, well, you prayed and you said the seance before the battle, therefore, hominis dominus, the bullets aren't going to hit you. And I also think that leads to lazy mental thinking, because there's this idea that, okay, if I pray, if I just kind of go through these religious rituals, that now I've done all that I can. It's, let go and let God it was a term that I used. And
it somehow absolves you of like accountability or responsibility.
Or to put in the work. Well, I'm just waiting for God to bring the opportunity. What's God's will? And it's like, well, God doesn't have a will for you. Like, God wants you to be happy. God wants you to live your life. God wants you to help other people. God, like whatever it is. I get messages from guys all the time. People, for whatever reason, assume I'm super religious. So I'll get messages and DMs from guys all the time. It's a lot of like teenage guys, and they're like, "Hey, like I don't know if it's God's will for me to like join the military or not." And I was telling them, like, God doesn't have a will for your life. He doesn't, in my opinion. Whatever it is that will make you happy, whatever it is like that will bring you true joy. I'm not talking about pleasure in the moment, but I'm talking about whatever will bring you true joy in the long term. That's what God wants you to do. He wants you to live a happy life that you enjoy, that every morning you wake up and you're like, dude, this is awesome. I get to do this. Whether that's fighting MMA, whether that's being a SEAL, whether that's being a painter or a lawyer, it doesn't matter. That's what he wants you to do. And unless you're doing that, if you are miserable, if you hate your life, then you are not in quote unquote God's will, in my opinion. Because that's not what you were designed to do.
And it should be self-critiquing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're miserable at what you're doing, the answer as to whether or not that you should at least be looking at other options and avenues for things to do is, in my opinion, like I said, self-critiquing.
Right. And like how I grew up, it was, well, now you're just suffering for Jesus.
Oh, God.
Exactly.
That's
and it was
a stretch too much for me. I'm sorry.
No, exactly. No, I agree. And it was like, no, like that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So exactly. That's why I was like, all right, I gotta, I had to leave and get out of that. But well-intentioned folks though too. I want to be clear. Like they're real nice people, good people.
Oh, you did. I don't think you put them down in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm blown away by what you've been through and what you're still doing right now. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come out here to Montana and at least sitting down and record this.
Oh, dude, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
This is super cool. I was really looking forward to coming out here and meeting you and talking, man. Yeah, for sure.
Well, stay in touch, and as things continue to grow, let's do another episode. So
awesome.
we can fill people in on what you've done from today and moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, let's definitely do it.
Killer. There we go.